Hello and welcome to the Megacast. Today's topic is supporting and extending virtual environments. This event is produced by Actual Tech Media, and on today's Megacast, you'll hear from experts at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Solarwinds, Faction, Flexential, Clumio, Druva, and Veeam. We've got a ton of excellent, innovative content lined up for you today on this event. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us on the Megacast. We want this to be an educational event, and we hope that you bring us your toughest IT challenges there in the questions box, and we're here to help you solve your problems. We at Actual Tech Media created the Megacast, EcoCast, and Summit event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology and help you to do it from the comfort of your home. You don't have to go to a convention or a trade show, which most of us aren't doing today anyways. So having the Megacast here available, we hope, is an excellent resource to help you solve your IT challenges and learn about the most innovative solutions in the industry. Now, before we get started, just a little bit of information that you need to know about concerning today's event. First off, this is a Megacast, and as I like to say, we have mega prizes lined up for you today. I'll talk about those in just a moment, as well as the prize eligibility requirements. We also have Q&A sessions that we'll be doing with each of our presenters, so make sure you get your questions in early, and I'll be queuing up the best questions for those live Q&A sessions. We'll also have a number of questions for you out there in the audience. I have some poll questions that I'll be asking here in just a moment. I'll be sharing the results of those polls with you so that you can see how you stack up with your peers on today's presentation. Social, we want this to be a social event. So we have the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. If you tweet using that Twitter widget, the hashtag for today's presentation, which is ATM Megacast, will be automatically appended, and we'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. I'll be tweeting about the event as well, and of course we welcome your happy comments about what you're learning over on Twitter. And then we have a number of resources there in the Handouts tab on the left-hand side of your audience console, and I can call your attention to that now. And that's where you'll find hand-selected handouts from each of our presenters. A number of them are URLs, but we also have ebooks, solution briefs, white papers, other sorts of resources you'll want to make sure that you download before the event is over so that you can read those after today's presentation. And with that, let's talk about the prize giveaways. Like I said, this is a Megacast, and we've got some really fun prizes today. 10 brand new Nintendo Switch consoles. I love the Nintendo Switch. You probably do as well, but it would be cool to have a brand new one for you or maybe the family. We'll be giving out 10 Nintendo Switches today, as well as an Amazon $500 gift card after every presenter on today's event. That's 7 Amazon $500 gift cards. And with an Amazon $500 gift card, I'm sure you could buy a Switch if you don't win one, as well as maybe a few games to go along with it. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings, and I'll be announcing the winners throughout the event. To be eligible for the drawings, you must also meet the prize terms and conditions. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. You can find the full prize conditions over in the Handouts tab where it says ATM Prize Terms. Now, Actual Tech Media has been supporting the Direct Relief charity, and we continue to do so until COVID-19 is beat. We'll be donating $500 to Direct Relief for every Megacast, EcoCast, and Summit event that we run. By supporting today's Megacast event, just by being here, you are helping us to support Direct Relief, who provides critical healthcare supplies to frontline medical and healthcare workers. So we do appreciate your support. We've also been supporting the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and One Tree Planted in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can go to gorilla.guide to download free educational IT books on a wide variety of topics. If you like to read and you like fun content and want to learn, gorilla.guide is a great free resource. When it comes to social, like I said, the hashtag for today is ATM Megacast. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter at Actual Tech Media, and me, David M. Davis, as well. You can subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media channels over on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast in the iTunes Store, as well as over on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn to learn about our latest and greatest content and events like this one. Now, before we jump into it with today's presentation, I've got just a few slides here where I want to talk about why this event is so relevant and important to IT professionals such as yourselves. So, why should we care about the virtual infrastructure? Why is it just so critical to many companies out there? Well, it might have been first that you ran the low-hanging fruit, if you will, on it, less critical business applications. But today, surveys tell us that the virtual infrastructure runs most companies' business-critical applications. And because of that, the virtual infrastructure is just so important. It has to be up and running. It has to be performing well. Those applications are critical to your business, and as IT professionals, we have to keep them up and running. And despite the hype around cloud-native applications, that applications are moving to the cloud, surveys tell us that the virtual infrastructure just continues to grow at most companies. These business-critical applications aren't just hopping over to the cloud like a bunny rabbit. They are staying in the virtual infrastructure in many cases, and those applications and their associated data continue to grow. So storage demands continue to increase, and we in the IT department must be protecting the virtual infrastructure with data protection solutions that offer a rapid recovery time and as little data loss as possible, hopefully zero data loss. And I kind of put a note to self in there that ransomware would be just disastrous for any virtual infrastructure, because that's where these critical applications run. So we have to have disaster recovery in place. It must be tested, and we must be able to prove to the executives and to the auditors and for compliance purposes that disaster recovery is always ready to go. And then finally, monitoring is going to be critical for any virtual infrastructure, because you want to try to prevent problems before they happen. And should they happen, you need to be able to solve them very quickly. And this is a tall order, right? This is a big challenge for us in IT. So how do we accomplish that? Well, we need new innovations all the time. The legacy tools of yesteryear just aren't going to cut it when it comes to monitoring and protecting, for example, today's virtual infrastructures. Cloud-enabled tools are ideal for a variety of reasons, because cloud, for example, let's say with data protection or disaster recovery, can kind of give us this infinite scalability and an environment should we need to recover that's immediately available. But there's a number of other reasons to consider tools that are cloud-enabled. They also, in many cases, give us some level of affordability. So we need affordable tools. This isn't a time to just be spending money willy-nilly. We need tools that make sense for the company. Those tools need to be scalable for the future. They need to be extensible to work with other tools, other applications, and perhaps the public cloud. And we need to be able to prove their value and effectiveness to the business. So that is my 2 cents on why today's topic is so important, and I'm excited to hear from all of our experts at the companies you see here on the screen. We've got some great presentations, some live demos lined up for you today. Before I introduce you to our first presenter, we're going to jump into a series of polls here. And of course, we appreciate your participation in these. We'll be publishing the results of these polls in an upcoming report from Actual Tech Media. But you can get some value out of these, hopefully right now, by answering the poll question there on the screen. We will share the results of this, and you can kind of see how you stack up with your peers. I would suspect that most of us aren't getting out and talking to our peers in the community or at conferences or events, in person these days. So, perhaps this is a good opportunity for you to answer the poll, and you can kind of see how your experience compares to the hundreds and hundreds of other IT professionals who are live on today's Megacast. So the question on the screen is, since the start of 2020, has the size of your IT team changed at all? And let me share the results of this first question with you. And it looks like 60% say no, we're right where we started. That's awesome. 19% say they added a couple of people. Excellent. It's good to hear that only 5% say that, our team is substantially smaller. So that's good news for us as IT professionals. Second question here, what's your organization's stance on remote work? All right, let me share the results of this poll with you. And looks like the winner here was 51%. Say some are back in the office and some are still at home, but they'll be coming back. So good news on that front. I like those responses. Thank you. Let's see. Let's get a few more poll questions in here. We're about to introduce you to our first presenter from Solarwinds. Stick with me. Just a few more polls to go. Has the pandemic changed your company's IT priorities? All right, thank you everyone who responded to that. Let me share the results of this one. So 56% say a bit. Some things are delayed while we address new needs. 17% said not at all. 16% said quite a bit. 9% said the old plan is gone, we shredded it, and we're on to new plans. So last poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is, how are you staying up to date in the current environment? And this is a multi-select option here. I'm watching way more webinars than ever before. I'm curious to see how many say that. I'm reading a lot more papers and ebooks than I used to, and I'm finding more local peer groups to join. All right, I really appreciate all the responses to these polls. We'll have other polls throughout the event. And here are the responses to this one. 91% say I'm watching way more webinars than ever before. 45% say I'm reading more and more ebooks and things like that. So excellent. Thank you so much for those responses. I hope you found the results interesting, as I did. It's now time to introduce you to our first presenter on today's Megacast. That is Mr. Leon Adato, head geek at Solarwinds. Leon, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thanks for being on, Leon. Take it away.
Thank you. I feel like, can you hear me now is in the COVID bingo card that we all have in our heads. Can you hear me now where, oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute, is like the free square in the middle. So yeah, I appreciate having a chance to talk to you today about these topics. Obviously, a lot of this is top of mind for everyone. The topic I'm going to speak to today are the 4 steps, ostensibly 4 steps, to bridging your journey to Microsoft Azure. Really just getting from Earth to cloud is where I'm going to focus most, whether it's Azure or some other cloud provider, but there's a reason why we said Azure initially. Before I dive into that, this is me. I've been in IT for 30 years. I've been focused on monitoring for 20 of those years. Yes, monitoring engineer is actually a job that you can have. Used a variety of different tools over those 20 years, including SolarWinds. I joined the staff at SolarWinds about 6 years ago when they told me that the job title was head geek. That actually is my job title, and I took the job almost unseen beyond that because it's the best job title ever. So that's me in a nutshell. What we're going to be talking about, though, is, again, the process of adopting public cloud, and I'll differentiate between public cloud and private cloud and what that, what those issues are, and some of the elements along the way. Specifically, as it relates to the virtualization that you have had before. Because some of these things are fundamentally different in terms of the questions you need to be asking yourself, the questions that you, as an IT professional practitioner, should be asking the business, the questions that you as a executive in an organization should be asking of your IT department, and so on. And then, of course, one of the main lines throughout all of this is how to monitor, manage, and secure the environment. And yeah, sure, okay, with SolarWinds, I mean, I tend to think about things in a very agnostic way, but me, my mortgage, my kids' orthodontist, all appreciate it if you'd at least take a look at Solarwinds along the way. And I'm not going to make this a huge, 20-minute long commercial. Some of the things that are trending in terms of, ops management, and specifically when you talk about virtualization and cloud, are here on the screen. So digital transformation was really buzzwordy up until we entered the nightmare hellscape that is the COVID pandemic. And the reason why it's settled in is because businesses have figured out exactly what they need digital transformation to be, which is largely getting their on-premises, inside the NOC, server-based apps up into a more accessible place, either because it has to be accessible to the end users, the colleagues and employees of the company, and or available to people outside of the company, whether you're talking about consultants or you're talking about actual customers. So that has really solidified the concept of what digital transformation has come to mean. Which really pivots to the next item, the new different, or what I've heard somebody else term as the next normal, because we really don't know what it is. Or if you've been in IT for more than 15 minutes, we just call it Tuesday, right? Because things change all the time. But in this case, we're responding to a very particular set of pressures and events around us, and virtualization and cloud have become an integral piece of how we are succeeding at that. And that, of course, it lets us talk about hybrid IT. What do you move, what don't you move, and why? Evolving virtualization, not just virtualization evolving into cloud. It's not like, all of a sudden virtualization stood erect and was able to walk across the Serengeti or anything like that, but also that virtualization itself, the concept of what can be and should be virtualized, is also continuing to evolve and grow as our needs change. And the things that don't virtualize, the things that remain on premises, either on a fixed server or on a on-premises virtualization, we continue to hone and refine the ideas of what those are. And through it all, security. As was mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, there's just, nobody wants to get hit by malware. Really, nobody wants to get hit by malware if it's on a virtualized environment or a cloud-based environment. We really all want to avoid that. No one wants their company's name as the headline of the news in that regard. And so IT pros really need to not just focus on security, because that's sort of empty words, but also think carefully and procedurally about how security is incorporated into everything we do every day without it becoming a whole separate job. So one of the things in terms of dollars and cents that I wanted briefly to touch on is just the growth that we should see. So this is one of those slides where the numbers are kind of interesting, because the dollar growth, this is all in billions of dollars, the dollar growth from 2019 to the projected 2023 is pretty significant and larger than the on-prem or private cloud spend. However, the CAGR, which, yeah, I had to look that up too, don't worry, compound annual growth rate, which really just represents the steady growth of something from point A to point B if you constantly reinvested all your profits into that thing. So just the steady state growth. The percent is actually greater on-prem and in the private cloud, even though the dollars, the raw dollars, is larger for cloud. But the couple of takeaways I want you to get from this moment that we're talking about is that, A, neither of them is going away. Notice that neither of those is going down in the next few years. Okay, on-premises still is around, and if you have somebody at your organization who's pushing to say, we're not going to have anything in the data center, we're not going to have anything on-prem, no, that is absolutely false. The continued investment on-prem is happening, and it's a thing. So don't forget that. Even if it's a smaller dollar amount, it's still happening. The other thing is private cloud is the term that good IT practitioners use to convince executives who are really, really pumped up on cloud that they're still doing cloud without making horrible, horrific technology mistakes. So if you're not used to using your private cloud, which really just means the virtual environment that you've had running for a decade or so now, then start using that term, because it gets people really happy if they need to hear the word cloud or see it on a slide in a presentation deck. Okay. The other thing I had mentioned earlier about Azure and why we're talking about Azure, AWS is the thing that everyone says first when you talk about cloud, but Azure is where the majority of workloads are actually happening. And both in percent and in dollars, Azure is seeing a huge investment in real-world workloads. And that's the other thing, is that even going back a couple of years, if you talk to people about, well, how's your cloud investment? Oh, yeah, we're investing millions in cloud. We're doing all sorts of. How many production workloads are you running in AWS? Oh, no, it's all dev and QA and stuff like that. So the question about moving to cloud is different than the question about moving production to cloud. And of any of the things that the pandemic has affected, I think that's the number one thing. There was a rapid pivot to move production workloads into the cloud. And when they did that, Azure, which was already sort of top of the game, just increased by that much more, because if I need something to run my standard operating systems and my standard shrink wrap applications, that's Microsoft, that's Azure. They make it easy. Not to say that other cloud providers don't make it convenient, but that's where things go, and there's been incentivizations. So that's a large part of what I want you to understand from this slide, although there's some other interesting points along the way. And of course, these slides will be available for download and thinking about later. So getting to the cloud, there's 4 steps. Here are the 4 steps from there to here that we're going to talk about. And that's it. This is just one of those typical transition slides. And I want to start off with the fundamental controls of what we do. And what I mean by that is, as you are standing here on premises, knowing that things have to move, upward and outward, what are the things that you should be thinking, have in mind? And the first thing I want you to know, and I apologize for being crass, but it's got to be said, lift and shift is lift and it's really the worst possible way to get something up into the cloud, because as I mentioned earlier, and I will talk about more, the fundamental assumptions about how workloads run and what questions you need to be answering and what you need to be designing for are different on-prem versus cloud. The things that are meaningless or don't matter at all on-premises suddenly become incredibly important up in the cloud. And you may not realize that. The other thing that I want, instead of lift and shift, I would like you to instead adopt the phrase monitor and move. And by that I mean, I want the first step of moving something to the cloud is to know how it's performing on Earth. As my colleague and co-head geek, Thomas Arak, says, he likes to say Earth and cloud instead of on-prem. Anyway, you can't move something intelligently to the cloud until you know how it's performing here in the data center, because otherwise you are going to pick the wrong tier, architect the wrong system, and end up way overspending. Also, security has to be the thing that you consider from the very beginning. And I know we always say that, but it really has to, because nobody ever starts off a project moving to the cloud thinking that, leaving this in an unsecured S3 bucket is a perfectly fine idea, just fine. But it happens all the time. And part of the reason why that happens is because the person who's typically building that cloud-based infrastructure isn't the person who has traditionally built architectures and designs normally, meaning the developer. Typically, dev or DevOpsy people are the ones building cloud infrastructure, and of course, all your cloud providers make it ridiculously easy to do that. Click, 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 and I have an Active Directory environment. Click, 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 and I have an Exchange server. Click, 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 and I have a Windows box. Whatever it is, right? I have this environment. But those aren't the people who built the data center. The data center was built by network engineers and security professionals and DBAs and storage experts, all of whom had depth knowledge of how those pieces interacted and were thoughtful about the things that they opened up and unsecured and the things that they left secured. And yet, just to give an anecdote, I was helping a buddy of mine who's a programmer who says, happily, hardware is not my thing. I only do software. Great, okay, so I'm helping him put together a home network because, of course, we're all at home now. You need to upgrade your network. And I said, all right, we need to pick a subnetting scheme. We have to pick up, and he says, is that still a thing? Do we still have subnets? And I'm just looking like, where have you been? And the answer is he's been where he's always been, which is in the developer bullpen, doing stuff where the network and all that stuff was invisible to them. And the problem is that now that a lot of developers are in charge of building this architecture, they end up making the easy but not necessarily the most secure choice. Okay, that's me off of my soapbox for a little bit. Next step, prepare to migrate. So what does that mean, prepare to migrate? If you, as I said before, if you don't know how something is performing on premises, where the costs are fixed, where you've paid for it because you have your blades and you have your storage and you have all that, and electricity and all that, then you're in for a huge surprise, meaning lots of zeros with dollar signs associated with them later. You need to start monitoring your systems now to understand their usage patterns, their flow, and then translate that to what it looks like in the cloud. Preferably have a tool that will do it for you, right? Nobody wants you to, break out the calculator and try to do it in your head. Because controlling your cost on the earth is not the same as controlling cost in the cloud. And that has given rise to a new role, which is affectionately called the cloud economist. That's somebody who has technical depth, understands how cloud is designed and architected, but also cares about the financial aspect. So again, the correct tier is selected for the application that is being put in that space and that things aren't left. Just as one example of why those on-prem and in the cloud don't match up is the idea of sprawl. Here on, in your data center, if you have a few extra VMs that are running in the background and no one's really using them and they're a sandbox or whatever, you don't care. The only time you care is if all of a sudden the host has run out of resources and you need to reclaim some of that CPU or RAM or whatever, or disk, for that. Then you start looking to see what you can shut down. But it didn't cost you anything. It simply was there taking up space that you later on realized. If you have a VM that's just running in the background, not doing anything, just chewing up CPU cycles in your Azure or AWS cloud, you are going to know about it a month later when you get the bill. And it's not going to be a happy conversation with the CFO when that happens. You need to be aware of what the usage patterns of your stuff is before you move it and before that $16,323 bill from Azure. I know that's an incredibly specific number because I might have seen it on one of my bills once upon a time. You're going to see that number, and that's when you're going to say, oh, maybe we should have checked it out before we moved it. And that's really what it comes down to. So make sure that you are monitoring now, and if you're not monitoring, start to think about it. So talking about monitoring in the cloud now, right? Like monitoring on-prem is a whole other conversation that I would love to have with you. But monitoring in the cloud, well, the vendors give me tools, right? I think that if you've been in IT for more than 15 minutes, you know why, intuitively understand why having the vendor tell you how the vendor is doing, providing you service, is a fraught concept. It's just not going to, oh yeah, we're doing great, just ask us, right? Or to put another way, a phrase that a lot of us have heard is, hey, we call them, hey, things don't look like they're working so well, and they say, I don't know, looks fine from my side, right? That's effectively what you're doing if your decision is to rely on the cloud vendor's own built-in monitoring tools. Now, that being said, access into the guts of the cloud is difficult to get at specifically because of what cloud is and what it's supposed to be, right? So nevertheless, any mature, robust, effective monitoring solution, and I'm not naming names, but take a look at the logo in the upper right corner, but any mature, robust monitoring solution is going to give you insight into both your on-prem virtualized environment, how it is performing, how it's consuming electricity, how, CPU cycles, et cetera, and also it will give you insight into your cloud-based infrastructure, both on a performance standpoint, again, how much CPU, RAM, for whatever that means, but also in terms of dollar. Also in terms of, how it's actually consuming resources. Your most valuable resource, besides copy paper, is, your money, your actual, so that's something that you want to look at and make sure that the tool has it. Now, the other thing on the slide that I want to talk about for a moment is APIs, because, when you get to how am I supposed to do that, obviously you monitor your cloud-based infrastructure differently than you monitor the stuff that you have on-prem. pretty much gone are the days of SNMP. Sure, you can monitor with WMI, but you're really monitoring what the server thinks of itself. You want to make sure that your monitoring solution has the ability to visualize, meaning it can see containers for what they are and what they're doing. And even if you have ephemeral containers that appear and disappear almost at a nanosecond's notice, that it's able to track those and say what happened to it over the course of time. And you also want to have a tool that can use APIs. Now, I realize that for a lot of people who are non-programmers, and I'm one of them, the word API, Application Programming Interface, immediately causes you to look down at your phone and start scrolling, and I would ask you not to do that, because APIs are really wicked useful, and they're also everywhere, and they are for everyone. There's an enormous amount of data, enormous amount of insight that you can get from APIs, and almost everything in the cloud is built with an API interface in mind, and that's where you really get the good stuff as far as data about how things are performing. So again, as you're talking about monitoring your environment, you want to make sure that that tool can collect information in all the different ways, including APIs. Okay, that's, again, my soapbox about APIs. So last step, believe it or not, hybrid IT. Anybody who tells you that you're going to move your entire environment to the cloud is trying to sell you something, princess. It's really, we are in a hybrid world. Again, as somebody who's worked in IT for 30 years, it's always been hybrid. It's been this and that forever. It's going to be this and that forever. You're always going to have stuff on-prem. You're always going to have stuff that you choose not to move to the cloud, either because of security or cost, or it just isn't necessary. I have these conversations with customers and friends and things like that all the time when they say, well, we should be moving everything to the cloud. No, you shouldn't. Honest to God, no, you shouldn't. There's certain things that shouldn't move. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you can monitor and manage things when they have a foot in both worlds, where an application may have a cloud-based front end and application processing, but the data is firmly entrenched on premises and ain't ever moving, or whatever it is, and you're able to still get a picture of how that application is performing, how the users are consuming it, and what they're experiencing. I'm not going to tell you which way to go in terms of, you know, whether you should get multiple best of breed or an all-in-one or build versus buy or whatever. That's always the decision that we in IT have to wrestle with. However, I will say that the decision is not what seems easiest or most cost-effective from a management, meaning executives, you know, C-level executive standpoint. That isn't the right choice. The right choice is the decision that makes the most sense to allow your IT folks to get their job done. And I don't mean the job of watching the cloud, because nobody does that. The days of hiring eyeballs to stare at screens and wait for little blinkies to turn red is over. It's been over for a long time. You want to enable, you want to create an environment where the people, the IT folks with boots on the ground, can be confident that if something goes wrong with the cloud infrastructure, they'll know about it. And if they haven't heard about it, everything is okay, and they can get back to their real work of innovating and building new capabilities for the business to allow the business to compete better with what your business is supposed to be doing. That's really, when I talk about, you know, the best choice, that's what you're looking for, is the choice that will enable your staff to get back to the real job faster. There was an interesting quote at Cisco Live in Europe last year, back in the days when we actually got together in buildings and saw each other and even shook hands and things like that. The Cisco, the VP and General Manager, Daniel Lineker, said something, and I was there at the keynote. His applications over the past decade have moved from this role where they used to have of supporting our business, and now they're playing a role where they actually are our business. And he went further to say that brand loyalty has been replaced by loyalty to an application, loyalty to an experience. And that is true for almost every business, that the application is the business. The user's perception of the business is through the application with which they interact. And so your job as someone who is interested in keeping IT running well and the application running, effectively, is to ensure that. And the statistics on the screen are the statistics on the screen. I don't need to read them to you. But this just underscores, first of all, how important the application is, and second of all, where the application falls down. And I would like to point out that network, is still important. Like a lot of people, the network doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. Network still matters. User experience is second by only a little bit, a couple of percentage points. Those are the top two, and then log analysis, which is a technique. Those are those are there too. But how you get the job done of knowing the application is doing well, how you say to both yourself, yep, everything's okay, and also say to the business executives, everything is running well, is incredibly important. However, it doesn't come without a cost. The cost is not, in fact, the cloud. Even if you misconfigure it, it's not it's not the stuff you're paying for. It's the people who are doing it. So what you really need to do is figure out how you're going to get people trained, how you're going to get people up to speed. That's the desperately important thing, and that's honestly the biggest nut to crack. Along the way, I again mentioned security. Again, I'm not going to read the slide to you, but you've got to have that. And anybody who tries to devalue it or say we'll deal with security later, that there is sadness and pain. Here there be dragons. Just don't do that. So like the upshot of this is that, yep, okay, this is the commercial part. Solarwinds can help you with that. We have tools that will help you monitor, manage, and also secure your environment at any of these steps. Also, it's wherever your stuff sits and everywhere your stuff sits. So it's not an either or, it's an all things and. There are solutions to help you collect and visualize and report on the stability and the performance of the environment, and also whoever is doing it. So really, all things to all people. I know that that's a really hefty claim, but I've been doing this for a while, and SolarWinds is absolutely in that position. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Obviously, you can go to solarwinds.com and see more. We have free, and I mean that free, 30-day unlimited demos of almost all of our modules that you can try out, kick the tires on, and see what they're doing. It's not limited. It's not like 5 devices and then go on. No, it's everything. So that is my talk for the day, and I appreciate it. I am now ready for your questions. I presume that we have some, so go ahead and lay them on me. Let me know what we got.
All right, great presentation, Leon. We got a lot of good feedback as well from the audience while you were presenting. This is just what they wanted. A few of them said, love the jokes as well. Good feedback on that. So let's see. While we do some Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll that says, what additional information would you like about the SolarWinds solution? And we'll leave that up while we do some Q&A. Let's see. First question I see that came in, they're talking about, or asking about, I should say, how does vMan help me cut through the noise and drill down to what's really important when it comes to virtualization monitoring metrics?
So short answer, I know, haha, like Leon could ever do that, is really the answer is tracking the right metrics, right? And vMan, Virtualization Manager, is the tool that we're talking about here. It lets you mix and match the metrics from all over your environment, meaning, when you look at a virtualization tool, it shows you the virtualization. Well, here, what Virtualization Manager allows you to do is pull in your router metrics. It lets you pull in your application or your perfmon counter from a particular server, whatever, and put them into a time-sequenced graph where you can see the impact of various sort of secondary causes on the primary. And that's the primary way, is just making sure that you have the right metrics and then allowing you to track them long term to see how changes in one affect the other.
Got it. Okay. That's important. I like that. Next question, how will vMan help me visualize my VM interactions and get a at-a-glance performance insight How's that work?
Really well. Thanks for asking. So it's like any monitoring tool, it will help mostly by putting the key metrics front and center with customizable dashboarding, because the things that are important to me and my business may not be important to you and your business. And it's that contextual dependency that allows you to show how the knee bone is connected to the leg bone is connected to the hip bone, so that I can see how misbehavior at the disk level filters up through, let's say, the LUN or the array to the to the VM, to the host, and so on. So I can tell how things are impacting up and down the layer, and that's really where you get the insight of, oh, now I see how everything is connected.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, with so many layers to the virtual infrastructure, being able to connect everything there and see the dependencies and use that to solve problems and monitor, that's awesome. What about costs? Did you say that vMan helps us to monitor costs as well?
Yeah, it does. And as I mentioned earlier, it gets trickier to manage costs than you expect, and the rules for on-prem cost management are different than the rules for in the cloud cost management. With that said, first of all, collect the statistics, but then be able to apply your calculations of cost to those things. So being able to say that, CPU utilization on this system or on this collection of systems has an internal chargeback cost or an external per month cost or whatever it is of $65.32 per hour or whatever it is. Being able to add that into the system and then let the math just be the math lets you track the costs. Also, there are tools, Solarwinds has tools that allow you to actually see the utilization in the cloud of both in dollars and cents and also in workloads in real time. So that's the other thing is a lot of people don't think about their cloud bill until it comes due, until it actually shows up in the mail. That is the wrong way to do that. That's the wrong way to budget anything ever. And so having a tool that connects to your cloud-based infrastructure and says, yeah, actually you just racked up $16,000 in the last 2 hours. Did you know that? Oh my gosh, no! So that's, that also helps manage cost.
Right. All right. I like that. It sounds very comprehensive. Probably the last question we have time for here comes from Steven. He's asking, how do we get started? Did you say there's free trials out there?
Yeah, so if you go to solarwinds.com, you'll find that the modules have a free for 30 days unlimited download, and that lets you install it in your infrastructure. You can also install from the Azure marketplace, the Azure store and the AWS marketplace, so it's like 3 clicks and it's installed if you've got some spare, Azure dollars that you want to spend. So you can get to it from a few different ways, but it's a 30-day demo where you can throw everything you want at it, see what data it gives you, and if you like it, all you have to do is, pay us, and the only thing that changes is the license key. So it's the same bits. It's not different sets of bits. It's production bits. And you just change the license key, and you're ready to go from there.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. Leon, always great to have you on. Always a great presentation. I always learn a lot and have fun as well. I know the audience did. Thank you for being on.
No problem. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you to SolarWinds as well for supporting today's Megacast. Make sure you visit solarwinds.com. And as Leon said, you can go to the Azure Marketplace as well and download the tool that Leon was talking about there. So it should be easy to get started, and there's a 30-day free trial. And with that, it's time for our first Amazon $500 gift card prize. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Joseph Jules from Massachusetts. Congratulations. Still 6 more gift cards and 10 Nintendo Switches to give out on today's event, so make sure you stay tuned. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Megacast. That is Mr. Derek Seiler, Solutions Architect at Flexential. Derek, are you there?
I am, yes. Hi. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? Just audio check.
We can, yeah. You sound good. Take it away.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much. So first of all, thank you. My name is Derek Seiler. I'm a solution architect for Flexential. And just a little bit about who Flexential is. We're a premium provider of cloud and co-location managed services for clients that are looking to move beyond the on-premise deployment of their IT infrastructure and take a phased approach in their journey to the cloud. And we help customers navigate, what are the right applications and workloads to bring to the right types of clouds, what should be refactored, what should not be refactored, right? That is, something that may not be purpose-built for a hyperscale environment, could still be a good deployment for a hosted private cloud, or even managed co-location that still extends the benefit of getting the customer out of the data center business and protecting their critical applications and making sure that they're secure, recoverable, and always available. So that's our mission statement in a nutshell. I'm going to take a little bit of time today to dive into supporting and extending virtual computing and kind of going into that through the perspective of a couple of use cases. So I'll spend the majority of my time talking about two use cases in particular. One around edge computing, and that's this trend away from a centralized cloud approach to a decentralized or micro cloud approach, basically taking compute processing from a central more to the very edge or far edge of your client's network to take advantage of things like stranded data lakes, do better and more time in data analytics for data created at the edge, and we'll go through that. And I'll also take you through a use case around hybrid IT. So what are some of the big, disruptive trends kind of driving this, right? Probably number one that we're all, I'm sure at this point, a little sick and tired of hearing about is the current, pandemic. That's obviously reshaping the deployment of a lot of current IT dollars and probably going to have a long-term impact on where a lot of knowledge workers sit in relation to a centralized corporate office environment versus a decentralized remote work, home office, virtual employee type of environment. But before that and continuing after that, there's some major trends in information technology that are really driving the lion's share of wallet, if you will. And those are things that we're all probably all familiar with, right? The 5G wireless transformation, and AI and ML and IoT, right? So artificial intelligence powering, new design and application environments, ML with machine-to-machine learning and kind of the infrastructure requirements around that from a latency perspective. And then, of course, IoT, which is all the billions of devices, that are connected to the network to help data analytics and data scientists make, better use of corporate data and bring things like telehealth and smart cities and automated driving and so forth to the marketplace. So as far as that purpose-built journey from on-premise to the cloud, one thing that we lead our customers through is a conversation around, hybrid IT. What is the right workload for the right type of cloud? Is something purpose-built to go into an Amazon? Is it purpose-built to go into an Azure? Is it better, co-located in a, tier 3, tier 4 type data center? What sort of connectivity options do you need between all of that? Should it be deployed in a hosted private cloud? What kind of managed services do you need around that? Those are all things for clients to consider as you're trying to enable and empower these digital transformations with a combination of existing, maybe non-virtualized IT infrastructure with purpose-built, born in the cloud infrastructure. Nobody, or very rarely, does anybody get a fresh sheet of paper, if you will, in designing their digital transformation. They're typically dealing with legacy technologies as a part of that process. And they have to make all of these decisions in a timely manner, right, because you're racing against the clock. Ultimately, when I'm having conversations with clients, ultimately what we're trying to help them do as they're extending the virtual environments is help them to make, better IT decisions, to better tie their IT spend more closely to their revenue projects, and do that faster than their competition is doing, right? Because making the wrong decision in this environment because your competition might be making the right decision, that could be the difference between success and failure. So it's really just taking this sort of purpose-built methodology to the right workload to the right kind of underlying infrastructure. If it's something like your application development teams adopting a DevOps philosophy, right, and managing continuous improvement and continuous development chains, it might be better deployed in a managed container environment. If it's AI and ML driven, it might be better deployed in an edge computing or micro cloud type of deployment. Where does recoverability come in terms of getting information out of a disaster recovery area so that it's available and useful if you have a systemic outage like a hurricane or a major event, but also not so far away so that you bring about latency issues as you try to reconnect your users at time of test or time of disaster. right? So those are all considerations that we help in terms of mapping the workload to the right underlying infrastructure. So let's take a little bit of time for the remainder of my presentation to talk about two specific use cases. The first one we're going to go through is Edge. And what is Edge all about, right? So regardless of the deployment methodology of Edge, and I'll go through that on the next slide in a little bit more detail, the same kind of issues from a customer challenge perspective reside within Edge that they really do in a more centralized IT deployment model, right? You need to be able to have control around the security posture, how your users are accessing the critical applications that may reside at the Edge. You want that to be similar from a security posture as how they're accessing applications that might reside in a centralized enterprise data center. So you have security components to consider, you have remote management components to consider, but you really have the big thing that powers Edge, which is the latency requirements. And what are some of the how does Edge basically break down, right? So if you look at it across kind of three slices, if you will, you've got your core network, right? That's your enterprise applications, maybe it's archiving for very large data lakes, it's long-term data analysis, you get all of your high-capacity fiber deployed in that case. As you move into the near edge, you start to incorporate in that sort of wireless component, and now you're talking about last mile and sort of how you connect those users that might not be central to the core. And then you have at the very edge itself, where you typically are having application deployments around things like smart cities or smart industry or telehealth or things of that nature, where you're creating disparate data lakes at the very edge of the network. So how do you get your compute processing closer to that edge, right, to make more timely use of the information that you're creating? And the power of the Edge, can deploy great potential opportunities for businesses that look at it correctly, right? To give you some real-world examples before I go to the individual application, which is actually a deal as a solution architect that I'm involved in, I'll just give you some broader kind of use cases first, right? But it could be things like agriculture, right? Literally sensors laying in the soil that are measuring things like the nitrogen content and the moisture in the soil, and helping agricultural planners develop the right time to plant and the right time to harvest, and to maximize yields. It could be things like remote-powered driverless vehicles, right? The way that we plan cities and traffic flow and things of that nature. All of that is going to change. It's going to create a tremendous amount of data at the very edge. In order to make relevant processing from a compute perspective out of it, you're going to have very low latency requirements around it. So how do you kind of empower that to make digital transformation possible in edge computing deployments? So let me go through one specific example. So here we are in a little more detail, right? So this could be something that's deployed for things like smart cities, right? So how do you kind of control traffic flow to optimize safety, right? What's the right times to kind of flow traffic in and out? How do you manage, monitor, track from a safety perspective autonomous vehicles? How do you deliver smart health, right? If you're staying current in the news, that delivering health to rural America is a tremendous societal problem right now, right? You've got hospitals sort of pulling out of that as America urbanizes and suburbanizes, but you still need to be able to deliver health via telemedicine. That's where Edge in those sorts of application deployments can help. And here's one that's a little more specific. I'll take a few minutes to talk about this here. So I can't name names, but this is actually an opportunity that we're currently working on. But this gives you an idea of Edge, right? So again, the key theme is decentralized versus centralized, right? So this is a online sportsbook gaming company that had an opportunity to develop an entirely new revenue source via in-game betting. Right, so this was in Major League Baseball that I can mention, but it was capturing that video data real time. Video data, as you could imagine, is unstructured data. It's very data heavy, right? It's got a lot of weight to it. It occupies a lot of disk space. So how do you get the processing closer and closer to that so that you can deliver an application experience that allows something that's real time? So if you would envision kind of in a whiteboard scenario, a site you would log into, you see your game, you have a two strike count. What is the pitcher going to throw next, basically, right? So real time in-game experience for folks that are looking for that, for sportsbook companies that could kind of bring that product to market. And what they came to us was to say, we need a micro cloud type deployment. In fact, we want it bare metal. So we want the infrastructure deployed. We want to take advantage of your Generation 3 and Generation 4 innovative data center design. We want to take advantage of your network interconnectivity so that we can deploy a microcloud very close to where that data is being created, because it absolutely has to have almost no latency. Right, very tight latency requirements, so sub-single-digit millisecond latency requirements to be able to do the analysis against that data stream, to be able to provide the application refreshes necessary to make that a pleasant experience for the user of that application environment. So what was our solution? Our solution was to provide the infrastructure. Our solution was to provide the professional services around the security and the infrastructure deployment, as well as the Tier 3 data center services that could get it close to where, again, the edge, right? Get it close to where that data was being created, and it's going to unfold an entirely new revenue stream from an existing media content, right? So obviously MLB and their partnerships and licensing with in-game sportsbook betting had existing revenue streams and existing revenue models built off of that, but this unlocked the digital transformation, unlocking new revenue sources, right? This unlocked an entirely new revenue opportunity by being able to deliver, extend that virtual environment to the very edge of the network. So now let me pivot to the next one. I want to go through another use case that again carries the theme of extending the virtual environment. And this one is around, hybrid IT. So what does hybrid IT mean? And this is what's most common for all of the companies out there, and Gartners and Forresters and so forth estimate that this is well over 75% of enterprise America, right, that don't have the benefit of their entire application environment being born in the cloud. What that means is they've got some legacy infrastructure. It could be mainframe, running on IBM, System Z. It could be open systems, IBM AS400s. There's still a ton of that infrastructure out in deployment today. It's very stable, it's very dependable, but it has all kinds of issues around technology refresh. It has, maintenance issues. It has, personnel issues. A lot of the folks that actually stand that environment up and patch it and secure it and harden it are looking at retirement age, right? So you have these companies specifically in industry verticals like logistics and freight and so forth that don't necessarily want to replatform that environment, but they do want to take advantage of some digital transformation. They do have certain parts of their multi-tier application environment that are, web-enabled, right? They could reside in a hosted private cloud deployment or potentially in a hyperscale environment, but they still have, legacy databases, kind of riding on more infrastructure that, isn't necessarily repurposable or refactorable into a hyperscale environment right away. So that's where we come in and we have this conversation around, what is the workload and what is the right underlying infrastructure to support it? Is it something that's best deployed in a private cloud environment because it might have compliance requirements around it, like HIPAA, high trust, or PCI DSS, or, what have you, right? Is the data and the governance around that data set, dictate that it needs to be maybe more stood up in a private cloud deployment, or do you just not want noisy neighbors? You just not want to be sharing blades with a bunch of other tenants because you're going to be running high IOPS processing and you want a private cloud deployment? Or is it something around, your managed DevOps that's perfectly deployed in a public cloud environment, and you want interconnectivity between it? A managed service provider like Flexential can do that. We can be an on-ramp into the public cloud, but also your hosting and managed services provider for your private cloud deployments. There's a significant boomerang effect. Some of the previous speakers have talked about this. There are, a lot of companies out there today that are beginning to claw back some of those workloads from the hyperscale environment because they realized they really took the wrong workload to the wrong type of cloud, and they're getting a bit of that, eye-opener where their cost model lacks a lot of predictability. Or if you look at the bottom right of the screen, is it just something that doesn't need to be refactored at this time? Is it tried and true, and all of your users are quite comfortable with it? Then maybe just want to be out of the data center business managing it and hosting it. A top-tier managed service provider can provide that co-location experience around it. And that's really what we help. We kind of take in these hybrid IT deployments a very consultative approach around it to help them and understand that it is a journey. The the underlying pain point, the underlying customer desires to get out of the data center business is to repurpose critical IT personnel up into the application space and deploy them less into the infrastructure space. They care less and less about where the application resides, so long, and this is important, so long as the underlying infrastructure has the necessary security components and has the necessary performance components to host that workload. So we take that consultative approach around, migrating to the cloud in that way. And here's another use case, name withheld. This is a large healthcare provider of managed healthcare services to the long care nursing and hospice care market. They had, obviously, being in that vertical, HIPAA compliance was a key driver. They had certain applications that were ready to be deployed into a virtualized environment, in this case deployed into a hosted private cloud. They had other applications that couldn't be refactored at that particular point in time, but they wanted the proverbial single throat to choke. They wanted an SLA around uptime, availability, recoverability from an RTO and RPO perspective, a recovery time, a recovery point perspective. They wanted a single set of SLAs around all of it in a managed service provider that they knew that they could grow with, that could host their hybrid IT infrastructure across the board, whether virtualized or not. And the Flexential solution that we provided them was a mix of Tier 3 and Tier 4 data center co-location environments. So they're actually deployed across a couple of different data centers, as well as stood up and hosted in a single tenant private cloud environment. It was professional services around all of that, from a cloud migration, a disaster recovery readiness, test planning, things like that. And then a sub 8-hour RTO and RPO for a pretty significant virtual machine environment with, multiple tens of terabytes of recovered data. And basically the customer outcome around that was, faster time to market for retasking their IT. They were able to deploy managed DevOps for quicker application deployments. They had greater application resiliency. They had several failed tests before as they were doing their own backup and DR internally. So they weren't able to successfully, manage that with their own IT resources, and then they could redeploy those IT resources more up into the application space and make better use out of that dollar and enjoy, a better TCO against their, do-it-yourself or DIY model that they had deployed before. And that's basically, kind of the wrap-up of it all, right, which is even as you're extending these virtual environments farther and farther out, whether that's edge or you're looking to, how do you unleash these digital transformations with a mix of legacy as well as virtualized infrastructure, the end discussion that we recommend always taking with our clients and the approach we always take, and hopefully you can call upon us to help you guide you through this decision, is to really let the application workload be the guide. Right? What is the workload? What is the right kind of infrastructure that it should be deployed on? And you should have a managed service provider that can help you determine that, because if in effect you're basically doing a business continuity insurance policy. You're buying the right infrastructure for the right types of workloads with the right amount of cost around it, with the right performance characteristics, with the right security characteristics, and you need a partner that can help you wayfind that rather complex environment, but doesn't limit you in how you want to grow, whether that's growing into a hyperscale environment, whether that's clawing back from a hyperscale environment, whether that's centralizing your IT applications, whether it's decentralizing your IT applications, right? Your cloud managed service provider should be able to do all of the above. And so with that, I think I wrap up. And I was timing myself just to stay under 20 minutes, so I have a few minutes for any available questions. But first, let me thank you for the opportunity to present. We certainly appreciate it on behalf of Flexential.
Great presentation, Derek. Really appreciate that. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there. I want to call your attention to what additional information would you like about the Flexential solution. So let's see, I've put a handful of questions there for you, Derek, in the folder. First one I wanted to ask you is, they're saying, how can I determine which applications are ready for the cloud and accelerate my company's digital transformation? Can you kind of step us through the process or any tips?
Yeah, so a good way to look at that is to look at the underlying architecture of the application itself. So if it is in a classic multi-tier, n-tier architecture, where you've got an isolated database environment and then an isolated web and app tier, so as you're setting that up, typically you're deploying that in VDCs from a security subnet perspective with isolation. That may not be a good application environment. That's more legacy build, if you will, for that application environment, right? An isolated database and an isolated web and app tier. That may not be a good fit for a hyperscale environment because you're going to be incurring, egress fees as all of the traffic in those environments goes back and forth between the database and the web and app tier, right? So the web and app tier is your presentation layer for how your users, whether internal or external, are experiencing that application. Your database layer, obviously, is you holding your data and your processing against that as they're performing transactions in that application environment. And as all that traffic is going back and forth on those VLANs, you're racking up egress fees, right? So a great example of this is the NASA example. They took something like 20 petabytes of information from a project around low Earth orbital satellites into the Amazon cloud. They had certain budget expectations, and as their data scientists began to pull data down from the cloud in order to do advanced data analytics, they started to rack up enormous fees. And this is actually something you can quickly Google. So that's not just me saying it. You can pick it up, and it's available information for you. But their cost overruns, their budget overruns, were something like 600 or 700%, right? Meaning they blew their budget out by orders of magnitude, and it was really because they took the wrong application into the wrong cloud, right? That was a much better stood up in a hosted private cloud deployment where the cost model is going to be very predictable. So it's it's just basically understanding the workload and then working with a cloud managed service provider that can kind of take a platform agnostic approach, right? The platforms are getting very competitive. We're always held price, relevant and rational by the hyperscale providers, but the hyperscale providers are also competing with themselves. So you really need a cloud managed service provider that's going to look at that landscape agnostically and really point you in the right direction.
Excellent. Yeah, great advice. That could really save a company a lot of time and a lot of money by taking that type of advice. Let's see, next question is about, you mentioned hyperscalers. How do you determine where a workload is better suited, a hyperscaler versus a private cloud? Again, a lot of times it's just going to be the specifics around that application environment, right? So if it's got certain compliance requirements around it, if it's subject to HIPAA compliance, PCI DSS compliance, those things may. The important point is may. Those things may determine a better deployment into a hosted private cloud environment. If it's something that's a more vertically integrated application environment, right, like your ERP platforms, that's something that's really well suited for a private cloud deployment. If it's a seasonal workload or something that is not very IOPS intensive or designed to be tore up and tore down very quickly, that's much better deployed into a hyperscale. Something around managed containers, right? So if you've gone into a virtualization list, if that's a word, I think I might have just created a word, but an environment without the deployment of a virtualization software, right? So it's just basically bare metal with an orchestration layer on top of it to make maximum utilization of all the compute resources, and you're doing application development in those managed container environments. There's no need to deploy that in a hosted private cloud. It's more likely a better deployment in a hyperscale environment. And it's also more likely that application is not revenue ready yet, right? It's an internal application. It's those going through app dev and UAT before it's released into a revenue generating capacity where it becomes a little more critical to the business. Got it. Okay. Well, I think that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session. There's a number of more technical questions for you there in the queue, but really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's time and certainly the opportunity to be here, so thank you.
And thank you to Flexential for supporting today's event. Thank you to Derek for his excellent presentation. There's a URL there in your handouts tab that will take you to the Gorilla Guide Part 2, Taking Data to the Edge. Make sure that you download that resource, check it out, and get some more information from Flexential. course, we appreciate your participation in the poll as well. I'll just leave it up there while I announce our next prize winners. We have another Amazon $500 gift card going to Amy Peterson from Georgia. Congratulations, Amy Peterson from Georgia. And then let's announce our first two grand prizes. We have two Nintendo Switch consoles. One is going to Jason Torres from Illinois, and the other is going to Rob Cromwell from Michigan. Congratulations to the prize winners. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Megacast. That is Mr. Peter Elliman, Director of Product Marketing at Druva. Peter, are you there?
I am, yes. Can you hear me fine?
I can, yeah. Thanks for being on, Peter. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll advance to the next slide, and we're here to really talk about data protection for virtual environments and how cloud is changing that for organizations around the world, and really help you think about what you can do. Often we find customers are in different parts of their journey, and one of the things that's really driving customers, I think, to make change is the change in their environment. So public cloud adoption is accelerating for various reasons. Obviously, tragedies like COVID-19 or what we're all experiencing right now are often forcing people to accelerate what they're doing in the cloud, or they may have already done. Gartner probably about a year ago predicted that 80% of organizations would migrate away and close their on-premise data centers by 2025, and that could probably be picking up. And often what's happening is maybe you're reducing the number of colos you're using, or going from 3 data centers possibly down to 1, and looking to leverage the cloud in some other way to augment that. The other major trend that's forcing organizations to rethink both how they want to protect their data, how they want to protect their virtual environments, and even, of course, what's emerging in terms of how you're building applications, things like containers, is that storage growth and cost. And so despite all the advances we've had with deduplication and lower costs, storage in the cloud, cold storage, et cetera, it still remains a struggle for organizations to control and manage those costs. And that's why a large number of CIOs are looking to say, let's target that as a way to save money. And then the other element, of course, that's pretty dominant, I feel like, this year is security and compliance. It seems just to be getting louder and louder in the market space in terms of organizations being hit with ransomware and other types of breaches. And so, Gartner also, another stat from Gartner here was predicting that 40% of small businesses that manage their own networks would be hacked, but unfortunately half of those wouldn't even know that they had sort of been impacted. And so, that's really, in a nutshell, is really about how you can increase your awareness and your security posture or your internal processes that you're leveraging to secure both your business, your applications, and your data. The challenge with traditional data protection solutions is that they're really not built for a cloud-forward age. And by that I mean, well, let's start with architectures, right? If you look at the history, and depending on where you may be, traditionally customers were starting with software only and then sort of building out that infrastructure. Then the move was from software to appliances, and then from appliances into hyper-converged infrastructure. And the challenge with that is that while there's certainly been progress and efficiencies as you move across those sort of stacks, if you will, you're still spending a lot of time building your own infrastructure, and you still have the notion of what's stranded capacity, and the multiple data copies. And that's sort of, you want to tackle that storage growth problem, you need to start eliminating copies and looking at realigning how you're buying and consuming that storage. So the stranded capacity happens, for example, when you purchase storage for protecting your virtual environments. You're going to make a purchase for what you need for the next, say, 3 to 5 years. But unfortunately, you end up having to start to refresh and replace that storage when you're at about 70% capacity. And you might even do that before 70, and ideally you're going to replace that storage even before you hit 80. So you never really use that last 20% or so. And so that's the sort of stranded piece. But of course today, a lot of companies are also facing just simple supply chain issues that relates to that. The other element is, forklifting solutions. So a lot of what some customers are looking at or starting to do or have done is using simply cloud as a tier. I want to get to the cloud. I want the efficiencies, the elasticity of the cloud. I'll just start sort of pushing some of my data or even moving my own data protection solution, taking a virtual edition and putting that in the cloud. And unfortunately, most people figure out that becomes actually an expensive proposition for a couple of reasons. A, you might be managing some additional hardware infrastructure, or you might suddenly find that you have a difficult time predicting those costs, or running that virtual appliance in the cloud turns out to be a lot more expensive than you're expecting. And so what a lot of that turns into is that you end up spending more time than you want trying to move part of that data protection solution into the cloud to protect those virtual environments. And so that sort of time to value ratio is not good, because a lot more time versus the value that you're getting out of it. And then the last piece relates to sort of security. It can be pretty difficult to lock down the security of your backup data on premises, right? You need to make sure you've got your networking set up, you've got your controls from the administration set up, and ultimately what you're trying to do is create a data isolation, right, of that data, so that even if someone or something gets in, you can separate that. And that can be a difficult piece for customers to do. We'll talk about some approaches for that in a minute. And the last piece is just as business becomes more global and you're hosting data or managing data in more locations or regions, tackling sort of the regional compliance issues can just add complexity. So this is where public cloud can be a game changer for data protection, and in particular a SaaS-based approach, right? So data protection as a service. So leveraging a lot of the efficiencies that the cloud can bring, and really in terms of allowing you to scale faster, and by that it's on demand, right? So there's that cycle would exist as you seek to sort of grow or shrink or change the way the systems, the VMs that you're protecting. The other piece around pay-for-use is that you only have one copy of the data. So back to this idea of, how do I look to start to reduce some of my storage costs? If you're getting data off-site, right, you're replicating it off from a data center or remote office to another location. So you're going to have at least 2 copies of that data there. Sometimes you'll have even more. And so when you can move that data directly from an on-premise location to the cloud, you're really only going to have one copy of that data, because once it lands in the cloud, it's going to be replicated, right, 3 different times within a region. So the next piece is around the idea of data protection as a service, is that it's going to simplify the role of the administrator, the team that's working with backup and storage, because you're going to spend less time managing that infrastructure. And that means your team's going to be able to evolve to focus on really those business user goals and objectives that you're trying to support. And finally, security. There is, with public cloud, a built-in security, both around access, control, of that data and the data isolation piece I mentioned. I'll go a little more in depth of that in just a minute. Now, specifically as it relates to where are you in your journey, what are you trying to do with your virtual environments? You could be simply further expanding the hypervisors you're using. You could also be looking to move some of those hypervisors or those workloads to the cloud. And a cloud-based data protection solution can really help you across a number of these areas, right? So, and on the one hand, if you're trying to leverage virtualization to be more efficient in your data centers, perhaps even looking to close down a data center, that's where cloud-based data protection can play a huge role. Allowing you to migrate some of these workloads perhaps to the cloud or to another location, but also to support cloud-based DR. And that's this piece around sort of enterprise resiliency in DR. So if you were using multiple sites, you're looking to improve that resiliency that your organization has, cloud-based DR gives you that ability to have resiliency at a much lower cost. You're able to do your failover in the cloud. You're able to do testing on a more regular basis. And that gives you both a higher level of resiliency and gives you the ability to kind of respond in the event of some type of cyber attack or breach. The other element is, as you start to move some of your workloads, say a SQL workload from an on-premise server into the cloud, a cloud-based data protection solution can address that workload, right? And so you can protect SQL or other applications both on-premise and in the cloud in a much more efficient way. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. The other element would be, of course, if you were using something like VMware Cloud in AWS. That becomes, again, another opportunity for leveraging the efficiency of the cloud. So you've got a single platform to do that. And then finally, remote or branch offices. For a lot of organizations, this could be changing right now. And as you move through that change, the question is, how can you do it efficiently? You might be looking to simply lock down or secure the infrastructure and the data that you have in that remote office. Has a cloud platform that really can address your enterprise infrastructure needs. And today, really, I'm focused on virtualization, server-based workloads, but the Druva Cloud platform really covers a wide range of platforms. So providing data protection, governance, and additional intelligence on what you're doing across endpoint data, data center data, your cloud apps, such as these could be your typical G Suite or Microsoft 365 apps, and then of course workloads you might be running in AWS is where we've built our platform and where we run it. And so the value of this cloud platform and a cloud-based approach to protecting your virtual environments is this coverage, both in terms of services, so backup and recovery, DR, workload migration, but also simplifying what you need to do around governance, and then giving you some value-added insight, this intelligence that might have been difficult to get at when the data was spread across different locations, different silos of storage, and even different applications. Let me just give you, I want to give you a quick picture of maybe what this looks like. Druva, our direct cloud architecture for server-based workloads, we cover both vSphere and Hyper-V environments, and many of our customers back these up directly to the cloud. Of course, we also support VMware Cloud on AWS, as I mentioned earlier. And once that data lands in the Druva Cloud, you have the ability to keep it in warm storage, or as that data ages, to automatically migrate it to cold storage, simplifying what you need to do to solve long-term retention requirements that often sit with compliance teams or officers. But the beauty of having that data in the cloud is not only the efficiency you get from a single copy, but also efficiencies around storage optimization. So we use something called global deduplication that allows us to deduplicate data, across all your sites or environments. That will dramatically reduce, what you need to move there. The other element is this ease of recovery. So this ability to sort of recover the data to another location, recover it in the cloud, or to leverage the cloud to increase that resiliency with disaster recovery as a service, or disaster recovery in the cloud. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But so when you can take really the ease of a cloud native platform and remove all of the infrastructure management that goes with traditional on-premise solutions, and offer customers the scale on demand capabilities, automation around how those workloads are being protected, and how that data is being managed through its life cycle, you really can begin to accelerate the speed with which customers can move really their environment forward and move to a more cloud forward position. I want to talk just a little more specifically on our VMware protection. We've been a long time partner of VMware, and as I mentioned, offer protection for both VMware on premises and VMware on AWS, or VMware Cloud on AWS. And the beauty is, as you're building out or embracing a hybrid cloud infrastructure, Druva can be there right along with you, so that you have a single platform for what you have both on-premise and in the cloud. And as I mentioned, the beauty is that starting up and deploying this is amazingly fast. We have customers standing up and starting in less than 15 minutes. And once you get things up and running, you're able to sort of apply a level of automation that really allows you to sort of set it and forget it. But what I found, and I was talking to a customer yesterday, we're going to have featured at our VMworld event, so I encourage you to join if you're planning on attending, is really about being able to leverage things like role-based access control. So suddenly, they lost whoever was running backups, and when they moved to Druva, the value was ultimately they had to do less. They frankly didn't need the backup admin, and the teams were able to take over, could look at and monitor essentially their own workloads, as needed. Other elements I think I've already touched a bit on the global deduplication, on the scale. I want to go in a little more depth just on the disaster recovery as a service, because I think a lot of customers are surprised at the value and the speed that you can get with a cloud-based approach. So you have the CR Anywhere from Druva, and that means that once your backup data is in the Druva cloud, we offer DR for any of your VMware-based workloads, and we do that not only for your VMware-based workloads, but we can also do that for cloud-based workloads that we're protecting as well. And so through one portal, you can protect both your data center and cloud workloads without the need to maintain or manage any secondary DR infrastructure. And so in that sense, you're future-proof, because your application is always up to date, and you're not having to deploy or refresh any infrastructure in any other locations. Now, the beauty is that we put the tools in to make failover and failback easy. Things like a runbook, where you can build the order of the VMs you want to come back, in terms of, as well as additional scripting. And then the nice thing is, of course, you're not paying for the compute until you need it, right? And so that's one of the reasons you can remove a lot of the cost from what's going on. And more importantly, you're able to continually test this. And as we know, right, your environment typically changes about 30 minutes after you put it in place. And so this ability to do repeated testing is huge in terms of ensuring success. And then finally, how can you, and I shouldn't say two more points, but security is increasingly important to organizations. And so even though you've got your data offsite and in one region per se, there are customers who want an additional level of security on that data. And Druva allows you to sort of move that backup data, that DR data you have, into different regions. And so that ability to have sort of cross-region DR gives you just a higher level of security and resiliency. Finally is the speed, right? So once that data is in the cloud, Druva is able to convert that VM into that data that you have into a VM you can use in the cloud in a matter of minutes. And so as you look at different solutions, I would encourage you not to let that piece of the equation go by. The question is, how many VMs are you protecting and seeking to fail over? And when you perform that failover, how long does it actually take for that VM conversion to occur? That's where Druva spent a fair amount of our time making sure things work. So why do customers consider us or choose Druva? Simplicity is one of the big pieces. So I've talked about that. Other elements I would add to is really, there's no certification or training required. So when you start to move to a cloud-based approach for your virtual environments, it's something that you don't need to be a specialist to make this change, and that makes it easier for whether it's your own team or other teams that might be looking to have more control over what it is their type piece, right? Infinite scale. We're built in AWS, and we're able to offer all of those elements of availability and service tiers that you get in there. From AWS. The other piece is often customers wonder, can I actually meet my SLAs with the cloud? And what I would say is for a large number of our customers, really all of our customers, not only do we meet them, but we often surprise them by exceeding what they were able to achieve with their on-premise solutions. So I encourage you not to let sort of this idea of, wow, can having my backup data in the cloud really give me that or allow me to meet my SLA. And typically that's an RTO SLA, like the recovery time objective I need to meet. Security, we've already talked about that, but with the Druva platform, it's built in. And not only is it built in from our approach to the platform or the data isolation, but we also have numerous security certifications based sort of on the industry or other needs that your organization might have. Of a TCO approach, Druva is always driving down costs for our existing customers and passing that on, and typically, we see up to 50% lower TCO versus what you are using on premises. So making it simple for what customers are doing. Just want to touch on one great customer story. University out of the UK, University of Manchester, using Druva to protect their VMware cloud environment. And for them, really, the challenge they had was their existing infrastructure they had really wasn't going to give them a seamless way to protect their virtual environment, both on premises and in the cloud. And the mandate was to move to a all cloud approach, to move away from the on-prem approach. And of course, there was also a desire to sort of reduce some of the storage, right? And so Manchester saw a 50% storage cost reduction compared to what they had been doing. Strong storage reductions from the global deduplication, well over 2x. And they had a good sized environment, over 160 plus VMs that they were protecting with Druva. So it's a great story. We've got a video interview with one of the senior IT leaders there. I encourage you to look into if you have VMware and considering VMware Cloud or looking for ways to further strengthen that solution. So a couple of next steps I'd encourage you to consider is, attend a demo. We do these on a regular basis. We also have something called Techie Tuesdays where we'll do more in depth in those. You can also get one set up just for your needs. We do offer free trials, so encourage you to look into that if that's an approach you want to go, or simply go and see, could a TCO exist for you? And we've got an online calculator. It's got about 5 steps. Pretty quick just to ballpark what your TCO might look like. So I think you'd be pretty surprised. With that, I'll say thanks and turn it back to our host.
Great presentation. I really appreciate that, Peter. We do have some questions for you here, and while we do so, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about Druva? So the first question they're asking, just to double check here, this can protect VMware vSphere environments?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
And then there's another question here from Blake who's asking, how can you kind of confidently test a restore without incurring a lot of downtime? For example, restoring your entire data set, for a large 24/7 organization, that might be, a ton of data and incurring downtime. Is there a way to kind of simulate these tests or simulate restores?
Well, yes, you can, and as I mentioned, you can use the you can use our DR as a service capability. So you can choose 1, 3, 5 VMs that you want to test failover on, and essentially that failover test is going to allow you to test that restore and say, is my restore working? Am I able to sort of bring back up, whether it's one VM or a sequence of VMs you need to bring back up an application? And so the nice thing is, yeah, you could test that on a daily, if you wanted to do. It can really just be set up around your recovery point objectives, and then, as I mentioned, you can perform those tests as frequently as you want. You can also, if you don't want to use the DR capability, you can simply restore in the cloud, right? So you could restore the data from the Druva cloud into your own environment as well.
Excellent. And Brian is wanting to clarify, does Druva actually replicate the data from on-site or on-premises up into the cloud? So it includes replication as part of this, right?
Yes, yeah, replication is included. And we do offer a, I didn't talk about it, but if you have maybe low bandwidth or very stringent RPO or RTO needs, we have a local cache. It's called Cloud Cache. It's a feature that's included to back up locally, right? And so you could back up locally, and that replicates out automatically on your own schedule, for example, if you want to control bandwidth usage. And again, it also gives you a local recovery point from which to recover. So that's a no-charge option that's included. Alternatively, we send the data directly to the cloud. So in that sense, yeah, we're replicating or transmitting it directly to the cloud.
Got it. Okay. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have in our Q&A session, but really great presentation, Peter. Thank you so much for being on.
Yep, thank you.
For more information on Druva, check out the handout that's available there in your audience console. It's entitled, What is Cloud-Based Backup Recovery? And it has more details about the Druva solution. And now it's time for our next Amazon $500 gift card prize. That's going out to Rylan Showbarrel from South Dakota. Congratulations, Rylan Showbarrel from South Dakota. And then we have 2 more grand prizes to give out, 2 more Nintendo Switches. We have those going to Eric Schauer from Ohio, Eric Schauer, and Dylan Newell from Illinois. Congratulations to those grand prize winners. And now it's time for our next presentation on today's Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Chad Kenny, Vice President and Chief Technologist at Clumio. Chad, are you there?
Yes, how you doing?
Doing great. Great to have you on again. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, thanks for the time. My name is Chad Kenny. I'm the Chief Technologist here at Clumio. Excited to go through some of the details around what we do for virtualized environments, what we're doing around public cloud as well, and how we're just making backup a lot simpler than many of the solutions that are out there today. So let's first look at the journey that many enterprises are going through that is causing a bunch of data dispersion. And this data dispersion goes across public, private, and SaaS-based solutions that results in a lot of pains and challenges around data protection. That's what we're really here to solve here at Clumio. The first thing is that almost every single enterprise started off in an on-premises data center, and at least if they've been around for a little bit. And they've gotten some sort of cloud mandate or cloud initiative to move as much possible data to the public cloud. And one of the first big steps most went through is to actually move data to SaaS. And the reason being is you get instantaneous value, you kind of pay for what you consume, and you don't have to re-platform the application. And this has always been a big win for any enterprise who's trying to move quickly to the cloud. And this is exactly why we built Clumio as a single platform, as a backup as a service offering in the public cloud. But it doesn't stop there. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other steps and phases many enterprises are going through, including the move to VMware Cloud running on AWS, using the hypervisor that everybody's come to love with VMware, and extending that into the public cloud to be able to get the scale and the agility and the elasticity of the public cloud that sits behind that, and just really move the applications again with very minimal lift to the application stack whatsoever. But there's multiple steps beyond this where people are starting to do net new development or lifting and shifting legacy applications into infrastructure as a service offerings using things like EC2 or EBS in AWS. And they're moving these applications again to offload much of the infrastructure overhead and really be able to again take advantage of the cloud. And then this optimization step that goes beyond this is to start moving the database infrastructure into platform as a service offerings and get rid of the database overhead and really provide this in solutions such as Amazon RDS. And each one of these have resulted in a ton of pains of trying to be able to solve all of these challenges in one platform. And you'll see this across the board where most products today have many different solutions for each. They'll have a product for SaaS, a product for their on-prem, and a product for the public cloud. And this has caused a bunch of challenges. First is, they're way too complex to manage. You've got a whole bunch of hardware, software to manage and size for, much of which are very tough to predict. Installation, firmware upgrades also are time-consuming. Every 3 to 5 years, you tend to have these replacements or migrations that you have to go through to get the next-gen thing if it's on-prem. Or if you move it to the cloud, a lot of times you're shifting these to new technologies. You have to take a lot of maintenance windows because in some cases you're managing that infrastructure, even if it's in the cloud, and it limits the scale and the agility that you get from using these solutions. Also, many people are always fearful that they're either undersized or they oversize the environment because you're kind of buying these things either on-prem or in the cloud as an appliance. If you look at the evolution here, it's been interesting, and it's tough for the on-prem appliance solutions to be able to really cross the chasm into the public cloud, but they've tried. And if you look at this evolution, it's been interesting. First, almost every backup solution started off as some sort of software and hardware mix, and it was on-prem only, and it resulted in pretty heavy levels of complexity with agents and the like, high costs. There was some simplification that occurred with backup appliances that you saw out there, which kind of consolidated out the hardware and software, which made life a little bit easier. But it was really on-prem only, and you really only got the benefits on the installation, and that was about it. There's been a whole bunch of what I'd call hacks or tries to get to the cloud, which was first you saw a lot of virtual appliances taking what you did on-prem and try to do it in the cloud, which really just resulted in a much more expensive experience with the same limitations as what you had previously. Some decided to use S3 as an offload target for archive data. And again, this was just using a cheaper storage device, and so you got very little benefits from the cloud. And then what you're seeing most people consolidate around is snapshot management, where they use this primitive of a snapshot in the public cloud to protect data. But it's effectively just taking the data and landing it in the account for you, or replicating it around, increasing the cost dramatically, and just really not getting much value out of the cloud other than, taking a snapshot. What we believe this final evolution of backups is taking the ultimate simplicity of what we built here as a single platform in a true cloud-native approach and deliver it across public, private, and SaaS-based solutions. And what this results in is, first off, an incredibly easy-to-manage solution. I know many people talk about 15 minutes to get up and running, but when you have 4 or 5 different tools, it takes a lot longer than 15 minutes. And with our solution, with a single common platform across public, private, and SaaS, with no on-prem infrastructure to manage, no cloud infrastructure to manage or upgrade. You live in a world where you can see all of your data in one view, and the setup is truly in 15 minutes. We made the cost very, very predictable. Cloud tends to be one of those ones where people worry about the different cost models, especially around hidden costs. And so we decided to build a pricing model that was based on a per VM basis for a VMware environment. Doesn't matter what size, whether you get great dedupe or compression or not, it's the same cost no matter what. For the public cloud resources, we charge per terabyte, and for SaaS, it's per seat. There are no limits on restores. Data is stored in the public cloud and is restored either on-prem into VMware Cloud on AWS or back into public cloud resources. We have no hidden charges around egress because you're not actually managing the cloud infrastructure. It's solely owned in our service, and we provide that service to you with no incremental cost beyond the subscription itself. We can scale to any size environment, which is nice because we use the public cloud to be able to scale in multiple different types and fashion in a very parallel way, which provides a very different user experience for restores, of which we'll go through in a bit. And then we also leverage highly intelligent bandwidth utilization to only restore the data blocks required versus restoring the entire data set from the public cloud. In the last part, we'll spend a little bit of time around an air gap solution, but we provide ransomware and data loss protection with this being outside of the enterprise security sphere and having the ability to be able to have one policy, or many, that go across any of your data that you have in the cloud across public, private, and SaaS. The workloads today that we support in our single platform is AWS, EBS, and RDS native services. We also support Microsoft 365, VMware on-premises, and VMware Cloud running in AWS. The value that we get with this platform is being built natively on top of the public cloud and not just kind of being a bunch of EC2 instances that sit up there, has humongous values around parallelism and scale. But let's talk briefly about how this all works together. We built a system that has a disaggregated control plane from its subsequent data plane, and that enables us to be able to see all of these different data sources in one view. On-prem, we use what we call a cloud connector, which is a small OVA that's deployed that streams data through, does inventory services and resource management, dedupes and compresses data as well as encrypts it before it sends it directly into our service. There's no compute aspects that sit in front of this thing that manage it. It goes directly to S3. And this makes it so that we can be 100% event-driven in the way that this works and effectively optimized on the back end. As data is streamed through into our service, we then process it, we index, catalog the data, and make it available for you to be able to search, restore, do DR, and multiple different facilities within it. Since the application is micro-partitioned, we can give you faster access to the innovation that we build out there. And so as we come out with new feature sets, there's no need to take maintenance windows or upgrades. It's effectively just a browser refresh away. From a proactive support perspective, we can see each one of these functions. They're small micro-partitioned functions that are in a workflow that allows us to see if something fails, we can instantly fix that before a customer is even identified that that issue even occurs. And so quickly identifying and resolving issues is the thing customers truly love about our solution. Air gapping this is also a huge benefit. If you compare this to what we do on, what many do on premises is you have to have a secondary device, you have to have a completely separate network infrastructure, and you end up buying a lot of additional hardware. In the public cloud, you end up having to replicate snapshots across accounts and double the cost of them. What we've done is provided a true air gap solution, which takes the data out of the existing environment, whether it's on-prem, VMware Cloud running in AWS, or just AWS native services, and puts it into our service directly, which is outside of your security sphere. So if the bad guys get in, they're not going to get into our environment, as well as all of our data is immutable, so there's no way to go delete specific backups. It's stored for whatever that policy is defined. In VMware Cloud running in AWS, we have a bunch of really cool values on how we've integrated with the platform. So first off is we have no egress charges, and this is something to be aware of if you are moving to VMC. In many cases, a lot of solutions either go over the internet gateway or they store the data natively in your VPC. Both have some pretty bad effects to it. Yeah, something to be aware of. We actually do a connection through an elastic network interface, an ENI, to an S3 endpoint in our service. So none of the data traverses the internet gateway, and so there's no egress charges that you are hit with a protection solution for VMC. We also provide this air gap solution, which is great, and we provide rapid restore functions, which I'm going to go through next. The other big benefits here is that we're doing global deduplication across all of your data, whether it's on-prem, VMware Cloud, and native AWS services. And so it enables us to only send very small bits of data into our service, making bandwidth incredibly efficient, but also provide bandwidth throttling in the event that you have specific bandwidth requirements. We have very consistent compliance where we can enable protection of these VMs independent of where it's located. So if you have VMs that are on-prem or VMs that are in VMC and you decide to swap them, it stays continuously protected independent of its location. A few fun things that we do from a recovery perspective is we kind of enable you to be able to recover anywhere at any time and build in any sort of DR facility or even test dev environments that you want to play with. And the recovery mechanisms are highly efficient. You can do full VM recovery, so I want to take an entire cloned VM of the state of which the last backup is. I can inject just the changes that VM had since the last backup and restore it to that point in time. And we can do this incredibly quickly because we're parallelizing the restore in the public cloud, running compute functions in parallel to be able to restore quickly back on premises. Now, if you're only running on premises, we can restore to any one of your data centers. Even if you don't have the data center exist today, you can deploy a new ESX cluster, drop in our cloud connector, and actually start restoring data to that new location. Same is true with many of our other solutions. EBS volumes can go across AWS accounts, RDS instances as well, and even Microsoft 365 mailboxes can be restored to any domain that you have within the system. Now, there's a few things that everyone likes to talk about today, which is instant recovery. And we believe that's just not good enough. It was pretty cool when it came out, but when you look at some of the downstream effects, it's not exactly stellar in its usability. The first thing is that let's say you lost a VMDK in your production storage and you want to get it back. The first step is you've got to rehydrate the VMDK on your backup appliance. And that's actually pretty fast. That's why they call it instant recovery. And it runs on SSDs, so it performs okay. But you now got to go attach this via NFS back into your ESX cluster. And so now you're running production on top of your backup storage device. It's running, yes, but there's a sizable amount of vulnerabilities that are in play here where now you have production and the backup on the exact same device that wasn't really meant to run production. To get this thing back to a normal state, you've now got to somehow copy that VMDK over to the production storage while the VM's live, because now, remember, you're back in production here. And this takes a while, depending on how big it is, and VMware tends to throttle some of this movement because they don't want to impact the actual application itself. And so this is a relatively problematic solution. While it sounds good on paper, in practice, it's not spectacular. The way we've decided to deliver this is with our rapid recovery functionality. It enables in-place restores and doesn't force you to run actually on top of the production environment. And so what we do first is, let's say there's a VMDK that had some sort of issue. We enable the ability to be able to clone that VMDK so you can keep it for post-mortem analysis if you want. It's an optional item, but it's a pretty cool feature to have. We then rapidly rehydrate in parallel in the public cloud all of the different changes that need to be inserted back into the VMDK that's back in your production storage. And we only actually send the changes since the last backup. So if you, let's say, had a 1 terabyte instance that's out there and only 1% has changed, only 1% of the data is actually restored back on-prem. We then apply those data blocks to the VMDK, and now you're actually up and running on the production storage system versus trying to be in our service and trying to run this thing as a whole. At the end of the result of this thing is the parallel processing makes the restore incredibly quick, and you're only sending the data blocks that have changed since the last backup. It enables an incredibly superior RTO. We do this in a highly secure and performant way, and it's just a completely different user experience than you'll see with other solutions out there. Now, you get all of this cool value, and we can actually result in a sizable cost reduction. Here's a fun example of about 300 VMs, about 80 terabytes of total capacity. They're doing annual retention with 30 dailies and 12 monthlies. And they were able to see about a $266,000 savings over 3 years of true hard dollar savings. And so not only are you getting a lot of these cool values, but obviously saving lots of money as well. The last part I thought I'd go through is some of the stuff that we do to extend the virtualized environments and protect those right alongside into the public cloud. And we provide these native services, and there's a few fun parts and pieces to it. For one, most people are doing snapshot management and orchestration. In our world, we're actually doing a true enterprise class backup in the public cloud, which is something you just don't find anywhere else. We have a couple different methodologies for data protection, where we do operational recovery, we do account compromise recovery, and long-term retention. And we can do this with very simplified policy management across every one of your AWS accounts. We typically see in most environments between 30 to 50% reduction in comparison to what people are paying today for AWS snapshots. And we're giving you the ability to do indexing, cataloging, and even direct query access to our backend data lake. But beyond this, the restore capabilities in comparison to things like AWS backup is vastly different. EBS volumes go through a series of steps of restoring an EBS snapshot to a EBS volume, to an EC2 instance, to booting it up, to mounting it, to go finding the file. And geez, if you forget to delete it, you end up paying for it for a period of time. To a world which is vastly different in doing simple queries or searches or even file browsing for the files you're looking for. In our RDS solution, we have a bunch of cool facilities that come into play here. One is operational recovery. So we do an in-account snapshot, which is the thing that many solutions, that's all they do. And we give this away for free. You can try it out on our platform at no cost whatsoever, and we can do snapshot orchestration for operational recovery for you. As you decide that you need true enterprise backup in the public cloud, we provide a whole bunch of other facilities, including the ability to ingest that snapshot into our solution with indexing and cataloging it so that you can search and restore the data at long-term retention. But for RDS, we also provide a thing called rolling backup, which is an actual RDS instance sitting in our service that can be recovered to any one of your AWS accounts at any point in time, and give you the ability to be able to do direct query access for row-level retrieval in our system at any point in time for any data that you have out there. So you can do very advanced queries to actually pull the data back. We'll also open up opportunities to be able to export this for legal hold or e-discovery and various other things on into the future. All right, so that's our quick overview for today. Thank you so much for the time today, and you can find out more information on Clumio.com, as well as we have many fun things around TCO analysis and taking a test drive on the platform and just finding out more about our solutions across public, private, and SaaS. I'll go ahead and hand it back to the moderator.
Great presentation, Chad. Really appreciate that. We do have some questions for you. Let's bring up the poll question as we normally do. That just says, what additional information would you like about the Clumio solution? And we'll leave that up while we take some questions. Lots of good questions coming in here. I've put them in your folder there, Chad, for review. Let me just start with this one, and that is, oh, I lost it. Here it is. So you talked about how this is a cloud solution built in the cloud. Can this scale like the cloud?
Yeah, great question. So the platform itself is built on effectively serverless Lambda functions in large streams of workflows, and it's 100% event-driven. So no matter how much you throw at it, it can run these systems in parallel. And so we are as cloud native as you can get in the way that scale works in the public cloud. So if you run 1,000 backups, we run 1,000 workflows in parallel. If you run one, we run one workflow in parallel. And so taking advantage of the public cloud is really why customers love us so much for data protection across these different types of assets.
Excellent, excellent. Love to hear that. And then let's see, here they're talking about, you mentioned simplicity. Backup is never simple. How do you make it simple?
Isn't that the truth? Even some of the ones that actually look simple out there are still multiple different tools that you get to play with and manage. We have just taken a completely different approach to actually consolidate everything into one common platform and have no infrastructure to manage, and both on premises and in the cloud, and do so where you consume only what you actually, you pay for only what you consume. And you never have to do firmware upgrades or manage the thing or replace it. It's a service of which you consume what you need and enjoy the service while you're using it.
Nice, nice. I like that. Simple is always good. Another question here. How does Clumio prevent me from oversizing or undersizing my backup environment?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that's nice here is that you only pay for what you actually consume. So if let's say you had 300 VMs in your environment, but you only actually wanted to protect 200 of them, maybe 100 were test dev environments that you don't actually want to protect, you only pay for the 200 that you actually want to protect. And we keep that as a very consistent pricing model so that it's very easy for you to understand. And if you want to scale, let's say, and add an additional 50 VMs, all you have to do is license that and you just kick it off. You don't need to give us a heads up of when you're going to actually go and do that. And so it makes it much easier to consume than trying to say, well, I'm going to add another brick or another node to my system, where you end up paying for a lot of things ahead of time. And then that capital expenditure just kind of sits there while you consume it.
Got it. Okay. And then here's a question from Dan. He's asking, what kind of adoption are you seeing in the public sector?
Yeah, so we're seeing adoption pretty much across the board in multiple different areas. We have a heavy focus on security, and I think that's where public sector is seeing such massive growth for us. So we're ISO 27001, we're SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2. We've got our high trust up and running. We're well ahead, I would say, and there's multiple ones that I'm sure I missed here. But we're well ahead of the curve in the security side of the house, which has made public sector customers been very interested in our solution. We've also seen a big consolidation of data centers, as well as them trying to get out of the data center business altogether to just remove that overhead. And so there have been big wins for us in the public sector side.
Nice. Another question here, they're asking about, for on-premises backup and recovery, do you need a VPN to use Clumio?
No VPN. So we're technically going out over the internet, over 443, and so you only need to have access to that to get out into our service. The cloud connector itself does all of the authentication into the service and the like.
Nice. Steve's asking, what VMware certifications has Clumio achieved?
Yeah, great question. So we've been doing a bunch of joint development with the VMware side of the house, and so we are certified on VMware Cloud on AWS. So SDDC, I think 1.9, 1.10, and I think we're currently in the process of the most recent version. And then, of course, we're certified on the most recent ESX versions, I believe, up to the last 2 years.
Nice. And then JD's asking, how is ransomware protection processed with incremental backup change transfers only? Does that make sense?
I'll answer the first part. I'm not exactly sure where you're heading on the second part. So ransomware protection, we actually have a solution with our air gapping that enables customers to have short retention, so let's say 30 days. And they can actually augment an existing backup solution. So let's say you're using any one of the number of legacy backup solutions that are on-prem. And instead of you having to go buy another version of that thing and put it on a separate network, we actually provide a 30-day retention ransomware protection, which allows you to protect those VMs and augment your existing backup solution inside of our service. And then those can be restored at any time back on premises in the event that you have some sort of ransomware attack. We've seen a bunch of customers be very interested in kind of augmenting their legacy environment with this.
Excellent. And then so how should people get started with Clumio?
Yeah, great question. So lots of good details, of course, on the website to review and demos that we have online. We provide free trials, so you can go get up and running on the platform. We provide a free service with EBS and RDS. We provide a 30-day trial with any of our solutions that we have out there, so reach out to us. We'd love to showcase how awesome the platform is and how we can kind of get rid of the complexity. We say give complexity the bird, and change the way you do data protection today.
Very nice. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Chad.
Thank you. Take care.
For more information on Clumio, check out the handout that's available there in your audience console on simplified data protection to take command of your hybrid cloud. And with that, it is time for our next gift card giveaway. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up another poll question for everyone out there in the audience that says, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing solutions at your company? We're talking about solutions to support and extend your virtual environment. I'll leave that up there for a moment while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. We have a gift card going to Jessica Fletch, sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, Fletch from Tennessee. Congratulations, Jessica from Tennessee. Got a lot more gift cards and Nintendo Switches still to give out today. 6 more Nintendo Switches, so make sure you stay tuned for those prize drawings. All right, thank you everyone who responded to the poll question on the screen. We do appreciate that. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Megacast. That is Mr. Matt Wallace, Chief Technology Officer at Faction. Matt, are you there?
I am. Hey, good morning or afternoon, everyone.
Great to have you on the event today, Matt. Take it away.
Hey, everybody. Great to be on today. You know, this is a pretty fun topic for me, talking about extending environments into the cloud. And just a tiny bit here about Faction. We've been around since 2006. We're actually one of the larger VMware providers in the United States. And most notably, we're the very first, actually participated in the Lighthouse beta around VMware Cloud and AWS. And I think, in my sort of past lives, at VMware, at Level 3, at ViaWest before it became part of Flexential, I saw lots of conversations and got to talk to lots of customers who were looking to kind of go hybrid, and of course, tons of interactions with people with virtual environments. VMC was a bit of a game changer for us, and so really excited to talk about that, but also kind of talk about our more recent experience, which is actually around data and our data products. So hopefully I can tie this all together for you in a way that's interesting. Won't bore you with my bio, but you can look me up on Twitter at Matt Wallace if you'd like. So the first question is, what do we mean by cloud support for virtual environments? So, first thing here, from a data center extension standpoint, that's one use case, right? So data centers, they're not your core business. You end up needing more capacity, more compute, more network resources, or you have just some workloads that would benefit from the on-demand nature of the cloud. Possibly it's not about the data center. Possibly you have a team that says, hey, we want to run this application, but we don't want to train a deep learning model, recognize images, and if we put this in Amazon, we can just use recognition to do it, or things of that nature. The second, and we've certainly seen some of this as well, is this data center consolidation and evacuation. Now, it's not really supporting and extending an environment per se to just move it all to the cloud, although since you can put a virtual environment in the classic sense all the way in the cloud now with VMC and all these offerings that are coming out from the other cloud providers like Azure, Google, Oracle, all releasing their own VMware offerings, it's possible, and yet we've worked with customers who, they've got 3 data centers, they have 27 data centers, and they are looking to get out of some of them, right? Consolidation or optimization is another term that I've heard used as one of those reasons. So migration and DR. And so what I want to talk today about a little bit is the anatomy of a migration. And so probably everybody's seen this diagram before. There's this 6 R's of migration diagram that are super interesting. The R's basically here are retain, retire, redesign, repurchase, replatform, and rehost. And so those are different ways of going about moving some or all of a workload to a cloud or extending potentially a workload to a cloud, right? Retain, they kind of do nothing. Retire means, hey, listen, there's no business case for this app. Let's just figure out how to get rid of it. There's somebody still using it. I've literally interacted with people who powered something off just to see if anybody would complain about it. Sometimes that's how old and untended apps can be. Of course, redesign is the heavy lift. It's the completely rewriting your app to kind of take advantage of a cloud-native environment. Repurchase tends to mean you're going to move it to SaaS, right? You used to run your data warehouse on-prem, you're going to buy Snowflake now, or something along those lines. Replatform tends to be, you're going to look at the cloud providers and look at some of the capabilities of the clouds. You're going to move stuff over, but you're really going to try to take advantage of some of that nature of the cloud, not necessarily the full app rewrite, but you'll certainly reconsider the infrastructure architecture and how they stitch together. And then, of course, rehost is the classic lift and shift. And I kind of think lift and shift's gotten a bit of a bad name, and I want to talk about how cloud supports virtual environments and how lift and shift ought to be, in many ways, the thing you have to veto. You have to have a reason not to do it as a first step. It's not always the end of a migration or an extension journey, but let's talk about why. So today, you have to move your applications and you have to move your data to the cloud in order to do a migration or an extension. But one of the challenges that you run into is it tends to be all or nothing. You can't move part of a workload, and if it interoperates with other workloads on-prem, you have to move many of those workloads. If you've got 10, 20, 50, 100 applications that run inside, say, the same SDDC environment on-prem with VMware, and you try to move one, of course, even if you have a way to deal with the networking and extend them out, you run into this challenge where, hey, what about this latency I see now? 20 milliseconds that I didn't used to have in my data center makes these applications not play well together. But then the alternate of that, which is let's move everything at once, is really challenging because now you're talking about potentially hundreds or thousands of systems. You're going to do instance moves and set up hundreds of security groups at once. That is also a little bit of a recipe for disaster. And even Amazon provides some guidance about this, and it still tends to be a little bit challenging for folks. So that having been said, I'm just going to talk a tiny bit about VMware Cloud and AWS. I think it's worth really mentioning because it really is this environment where you have, VMware Cloud is essentially the same SDDC management stack of VMware, vSphere, NSX vSAN, just running on top of Amazon's infrastructure inside Amazon's data centers. So when you want to scale up the VMware service, when you tell VMware, I want 2 more hosts, Amazon just pulls them out of the pool of hardware that AWS has, and they can augment your environment, and it's neat. The screenshot here of vSphere actually shows an on-prem vCenter and a VMC vCenter linked together in hybrid link mode where you can actually see, and you can literally vMotion between those systems, and you can manage it all through a single pane of glass, which is kind of neat. This really changes the nature of the game, and it helps you overcome the data gravity problem. And in terms of actually moving, VMware provides this tool called HCX, Hybrid Cloud Extender, and it basically, it's a sort of planned vMotion in the cloud, if you will, of sorts. It can extend networks, but it can also say, hey, I want to prep to migrate this VM, do all the replication ahead of time so you can fail over. We have one customer who recently wrote us a note that commented that they literally failed over thousands of systems with less than a minute of downtime as part of their move onto our services around this, and I was super excited about that. It's kind of the best of all worlds, and I would challenge anybody to kind of, look for an environment where a move to the cloud can actually be accomplished truly with less than a minute of downtime. And the interesting thing, of course, is one of the ways that this ties into Faction is, we were one of the early leaders in VMware Cloud, but because of our cloud storage platform and our multi-cloud platform, we realized early on that those hosts may not have enough storage. And so we actually have an engineering integration with VMware where their VMC clusters can mount our storage platform as an external data store, basically exclusive to Faction, something we've been doing for years now. It's the reason one of the reasons we have so many customers and we're such a leader in this space. But if you've looked at VMC before and you thought, oh, hey, this doesn't work out because I need too many hosts for my storage, you might want to check in with us because we've really been able to solve that problem for a lot of people. That having been said, I want to talk a little bit more about data. because although moving a whole VMware environment with VMC is neat, and it's something you can definitely do, and it's very in the wheelhouse, I want to talk about the true cloud-native support as well. This ties in a lot of stuff we've been doing lately. And I picked this thing, that I thought really covered the 6 R's of cloud data migration. So in this, I posit that you can reuse your on-prem data. You can, of course, retire data and just not take it to the cloud at all. And I put this little graph about data gravity here down near reuse because it's problematic, right? The reason it kind of goes nowhere is that's really difficult. Without making a copy, trying to get your apps to access on-prem data is just too slow. And of course, you can redesign and re-architect. So you're going to figure out how do we change the way we store our data, where we store it, how it interacts with applications. Long-time pole, just like with the application side. You can repurchase. So again, you can move your data into a SaaS, stash it away in ServiceNow, Salesforce, Snowflake, like I mentioned earlier, etc. You can reformat and rehost. So now we're thinking about, okay, we're going to take everything we've got on-prem, we're going to convert it into a bunch of objects loaded into object storage so we can store it inexpensively, for example. And of course, replicate. So replicate is a certain trick you can do if you've got compatibility on both sides. And this is one of the things we help people with quite a bit because, again, it's this sort of easy mode. In the same way that the lift and shift path for applications is easy mode, the replication of data can be easy if you have compatible on-prem platforms. So we've actually been able to take people with major storage array systems they've already invested in on-prem, replicate that in a Factions cloud service, and then we can actually attach it to the cloud. And the way this helps you is it gets around the data gravity problem. If you want to access data that's far away, the closer you are to the data from an application standpoint, the faster you can do these round trips and the more data you can get. It's not universally true. If you can have incredible parallelism, which most applications can't, you can kind of get around this by filling up the pipe with parallel requests. Most applications can only go so parallel, and then they expect latency to be lower to have more throughput. You see this literally in the underlying protocols of the internet. TCP works this way. It has a window size for a particular connection. You can tune it up. Not everything behaves all that well with that. So let's talk for 2 seconds here about why you might want to go to the cloud. And the truth is, across clouds, there are hundreds and hundreds of unique services, and there are many similarities, like a compute instance is kind of a compute instance. But we are seeing differences even there, right? Hardware level, things like tensor processing units at Google and the similar inferentia chips at Amazon, the differences in GPUs, and then beyond the hardware level, the differences between service like Recognition on AWS or computer vision on Azure, both of which can recognize things in a still image or in video potentially, and how you can use those. Mixing and matching those services is the true support of a virtual environment. You've got an application set today. You don't need to change it en masse. But what you do want to do is you want to take advantage of the public cloud to speed up innovation. And this, combined with our ability to replicate that data to get it near the cloud, but not engage a ton of cloud resources to do it, is one of those things that's sort of our secret sauce, the better way, if you will. You don't have to make a sudden move from on-prem to the cloud with all of your data. Instead, with our solution, many times our customers can replicate from on-prem into a Faction cloud control volume, which we can then tie through our inter-network exchange into one or more clouds simultaneously. We have incredible support here that actually scales very favorably compared to even comparable cloud offerings. The fact that we can provision 40-plus petabyte volumes, we can have volumes that simultaneously support NFS, CIFS object, and HDFS, and we have block support as well on some volumes. The fact that we can support many common on-prem systems to replicate into us makes this a powerful way to get your data to the cloud. So with that having been said, let's just talk about how it works real quick. I just want to kind of just a few views, specify things like which AWS VPC you want to send to, what your Amazon account ID is, and it's literally as simple as supplying that, and our platform can send virtual interface requests to your VPC, which you can accept. We can actually dive in, in great detail here, but it's a many-step process, right? And it's exciting to kind of walk through how we've tamed this technology stack, but there's not enough time today to go through that as a full demonstration, although there is an interactive demo you can go through where you can actually click these things in a full kind of walkthrough on your screen, so reach out if you want to see that. And the end result is accessibility of the data in exactly the same way you have it today. So here I took a screenshot of a demo that I actually did at Dell Tech World last year showing this off. And the top shell window here is an SSH login into an Amazon instance. The bottom shell window is a login into an Azure instance. You know, there are different shells. You'll see there's different command prompts and sort of varying differences, but the highlighted red line, which is this NFS mount point of this 172.30.1.1 host, is exactly the same. Like you'll notice the number of blocks, the use, the available is identical. That's because it is the same data store. So you're literally having this mount point where, you know, imagine this contained genomics data or genomic analysis process. Imagine if it contained your big data that you were going to leverage with Hadoop. And by the way, you could be accessing things over HDFS instead of NFS, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are very powerful here. And it's interesting because we have customers that do things like have individual users with virtual desktops in the cloud accessing this over CIFS protocol, right? So they have a Windows file share on their virtual desktop, while the same data is being used by a bunch of Linux systems to do a bunch of processing in a completely automated fashion. And it leads to a bunch of really cool use cases. And again, I'm short on time, but it's absolutely amazing how you can apply this to things like genomics, other healthcare use cases, multi-cloud container use cases where this backs up the persistent volume claims for container environments, disaster recovery, and I could go on and on, just general big data. We're doing a white paper right now where we show it integrating directly with Azure HD Insight, all of these things. And it's the same underlying technology here that VMware Cloud on AWS uses for us to extend that data store. And so whether you kind of need to move a VMware environment and you're looking for the best way to do VMC, or whether you're kind of looking at, hey, how do I get my data there so that I can augment what I do in my virtual environment with cloud services using the data that I need to go with it, we kind of solve for both of those problems with this one platform and kill a couple birds with one stone. Hope that was interesting for everybody. I'm happy to take some questions.
Yeah, great presentation, Matt. We do have some questions for you. Let's see, let's just bring up the poll question about additional information. We'll leave that up there while we take some questions. So one question that came in here, they're asking about, I think it was in reference to an example maybe you mentioned during your presentation, but they're asking how is a network outage and high latencies handled in this sort of, I believe, hybrid cloud sort of architecture that you were talking about?
Sure, yeah, those are good questions. So interestingly, I mean, we're doing this in a way that's highly redundant. So whenever we provision, and actually this is, I think, one of those reasons why you definitely should not try to, you know, do this yourself. This is not a do it at home kind of thing. When we provision this, we're provisioning redundant network paths. So, you know, different physical wires going into different cloud provider switches. And so there's actually like full redundancy in the case of switch failure, in the case of backhoes cutting fiber lines, those sorts of things. Now, of course, we don't control the internal, you know, cloud provider networking, but it's very resilient against sort of everything between sort of cloud provider, edge, and faction. Now, in terms of latency, you know, one of the reasons literally this offering exists, one of the things we're always thinking about here is if you start thinking about how you want to leverage the cloud, you know, and you're extending your virtual environment, you want to start taking advantage of some cloud services. You know, one of the problems you're going to have, and we've talked about this on other webinars, is how do you know which cloud? You know, I did show you some slides about how there's this, you know, innovation going across multiple clouds. How do you ensure that, you know, the team that today wants to use Amazon doesn't conflict with the team tomorrow that wants to use Azure and you've dumped all your data in AWS? We solve for that, kind of keeping it in the middle. But the cool thing about this is, you know, we are actually locating our data centers ultra proximately to all of the public cloud providers. So you have this ability to have sub 2 milliseconds to every cloud provider in that region. We actually are very oriented around optimizing, you know, latency path. We even have data center contracts that allow us to exit our contracts if other providers get lower latencies to the cloud. So it's incredibly important for us to keep that latency low. And for example, you know, our access to Amazon in Northern Virginia, which is one of the most popular regions, ranges from 0.9 to 1.5 milliseconds of latency. In many cases, that's faster than accessing different things inside of the cloud. You know, I can't speak to the internal architecture that makes this so, but I will say, you know, Direct Connect and Express Route scale exceptionally well, and you don't always see that necessarily with every internal service, I think maybe because of the way that things have to kind of mesh around.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. And so one of the questions that came in, they're asking about is, we hear, of course, in the news about the large scale, hyperscalers, AWS and Amazon. So can you kind of talk to us for a moment about if somebody has an application that they're considering moving to the cloud, how could Faction help make that experience different other than just moving, dumping it into, say, AWS?
Yeah, I mean, part of this goes back to those two kind of past considerations we talked about earlier, right? On one hand, you have to figure out how am I going to move an application, and there's these replatform, rehost, lift and shift type options, et cetera. We're really good at helping people with the VMware Cloud option, which we've proven over and over again is the super low risk way to adopt cloud. And by the way, plenty of our VMC customers have come to us explicitly saying, like, our intention is to move everything into the public cloud over time, but this is the first step. And I think that's a smart move. Like, the truth is, there's a ton of operational things to be done. We talk about this with our DR offering as well, because we offer a hybrid disaster recovery service offering. The last thing you want to do when you are recovering to the cloud is take your VMware environment, recover it to Amazon, and then discover that your team doesn't know how to diagnose a network problem with a security group because you completely changed platforms in the middle of a disaster. Keeping that operational consistency can be a big deal. As far as the actual movement of the data, again, that's one of those places where we help, and we've done everything from using those platform-specific replications, where the hardware is doing the replication, all the way to doing things at a software level and actually shipping physical storage units around. We have customers that take our box. We call our station wagon unit, as you will, the Kraken. It's kind of our equivalent of an AWS Snowball. We ship it around and let people load data on it and ship it back, and that way you've got this encrypted physical delivery mechanism for people who can't stuff over the wire. Somebody asked if we're using Equinix. We are not exclusively in Equinix, but we use Equinix quite a bit in many places. We're also with a number of other Tier 1 providers. Typically, we're 2 to 3 different providers in a given region.
Got it. Okay. And so if people want to get started with Faction, if they've got an application they're looking at, cloudifying or, using disaster recovery as a service or something like that, what should they do to get started?
Yeah, I mean, certainly visit the website, factioninc.com, and reach out. And I would say, too, to self-qualify, if you have a data set that's larger than probably 250 terabytes, certainly anything over a petabyte, and you're thinking, I need to move this to the cloud, you are absolutely the people who should be reaching out to us 100%, because our huge success in kind of helping where no one else can, aside from our expertise with VMware Cloud, just on the data side of things, we've done incredibly well for helping people with multi-petabyte workloads smoothly either augment or migrate to the cloud.
Wow, impressive project, multi-petabyte workloads. Very cool, great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Matt.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
For more information on Faction, like Matt said, visit the website or also check out the handout that's available there in your audience console. It's entitled Network Considerations for Extending to the Cloud. Actually, it's Matt's full presentation. I just realized that, sorry, in PDF form. So go ahead and download that. Really cool diagrams, really cool examples in there. Make sure that you don't let that resource pass you by. It's there in the Handouts tab. And now it's time for our next prize winner. We have an Amazon $500 gift card, and that's going out to Nikki Barnes from Kansas. Congratulations, Nikki Barnes from Kansas. And then we have 2 more Nintendo Switches to give out, 2 more of our grand prizes. We have those going out to Robert Lundgren from Connecticut. Congratulations. And Jeffrey Graves from Wisconsin. Congratulations to both of you. 4 more grand prizes still to give out, so make sure you stay tuned. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next presenters on today's Megacast, welcoming Mr. Edward Watson, Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and Billy Cashwell, Senior Manager of Product Marketing, also at Veeam. Edward and Billy, thank you for being on.
Hey, thanks
Great.
again.
Yeah,
thank you for having us. Yeah, we're so excited we talk at the same time. So again, thank you for joining us today. Edward and I are both from Veeam. My responsibilities lie with Veeam backup and replication. Edward specializes in our Office 365 and some of our cloud offerings. We're here to talk to you today about why backup, specifically backup, is still so essential when you're dealing with things like Azure and Office 365 and the cloud in general. So as we go through this, let's first start out with a little bit of data. This source comes from Forbes' 10 Key Takeaways from RightScale in the 2020 State of the Cloud report. This is from May 2020. And what it's showing you is that just about all customers, you namely, have adopted some sort in some form of a multi-cloud strategy. Where some people may have adopted truly multi-cloud, public cloud, we commonly see that the most of the folks here exist in that hybrid area. So you see 87% of that output is hybrid. And when we say hybrid here, we're typically talking about one or more public clouds added with a private cloud. And again, this is what we see the lion's share of what people are using out there in the industry. Something that is important to call out is that the need to back up and cloud itself is both here and now. It's not something that's coming tomorrow or coming in 2 years. If we look at the number there in the center on the ring that shows 93% of the respondents said, I'm using some sort of multi-cloud strategy. Just as a reminder, that was around 84% last year. So just in the last year, it's grown 10%, and we expect it to keep growing. This is becoming the new norm. Like we said, it's here and now, and a big misconception that we hear here at Veeam as a data protection and a data management company is that backup is not really needed, or you guys will ask, do I need to back up? Well, the answer is yes, and we don't say that because that is what we're in the business of. We say that because you have to understand the responsibilities that are on you and the responsibilities of your cloud providers, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The important thing to note here is that data loss still happens within the cloud, either from the good old accidental deletion to any confusion and retention policies. If you think about all the regulatory compliance, all the different types of retention for different types of data that you have to keep up with daily, you may or may not be an expert on that, yet you're still dealing with it. You always have to think about internal security threats, whether it's a malicious insider or perhaps it was someone that was doing some additional code work for us that, we let them go, they're still in the system, and they can come back in and do some malicious things to your data. They can even hide some sorts of malware and ransomware inside of that data that you may not even find until you recover it back into your production environment. Of course, we always have the external security threats. I just talked about ransomware. Ransomware and rogue apps are the name of the game. Ransomware has been the king of just wrecking data left and right, holding people for ransom literally, and it really just leaves you with, do you trust that data again? Compound that with legal compliance and the requirements that we talked about earlier, and then now you're not just managing that that physical infrastructure, that on-premises infrastructure that you had before. Now you're extending this out to hybrid. I know in the beginning that we treated the cloud as just kind of a virtual physical thing out there, but it's really become a class and a platform of its own. It has its own intricacies, and it's something that we've got to understand when we're looking at protecting our data. So just really quick on this one, just to point out that over the past 2 years, this was a study that we did internally at Veeam of Veeam customers, trying to find out what are the things that cause most of your IT outages, and it's the typical items that you expect to see, right? The only one that's kind of the standout here is the storage hardware outage, because as we move and embrace infrastructure as a storage and storage as infrastructure as a service and storage as a service even more, these are things that are handled by the back end. But all the typicals are still rearing their head here, whether it be an outage of connectivity, some type of outage at the application level, or just configuration error or intentional or accidental deletion. So I talked about earlier about what is your responsibility? What is the responsibility of your provider? And remember I said, Veeam is not telling you need a backup because this is one of the things that we sell. We're telling you that because it's actually your responsibility as the customer. So I'm not going to take you through this whole chart. You guys can look at it later, just glance at it right now. But you can see as you go from things like software as a service all the way down to platform or infrastructure as a service, when it comes down to data protection and making sure that data is backed up, that's something that still is a responsibility of the customer. So what companies like Microsoft, they'll tell you the same thing. Companies like Amazon, Google, they will tell you that they're guaranteeing uptime. There may be some things in a recycler, but if you have to go back for any litigation reasons, if you have to go back to get, to a previous recovery point that was before some type of infection, you're going to be hard-pressed to do that without any type of traditional backup. So now let's talk about the new Veeam backup from Microsoft Azure. This is something we released just earlier this year, and we're very excited to increase our backup portfolio with this and really helping you to embrace those stats we saw in that first slide, that you are currently adopting some sort of hybrid infrastructure. So as we go take a look at this product that released back in April, this is something that was purpose-built to protect the Azure VMs that are out there. So it's completely integrated into Azure. You're not having to go into compute and instantiate a lot of servers as if they were physical. This is something that's truly integrated. It's cost-effective in that it's leveraging the cloud for you. It can intelligently move things out to blob storage. The security is there from the initial creation of the backup, sending backup to the cloud, or in the case of Veeam backup for Azure, you're actually getting the security of the cloud and the security of the backup, the inherent security that Veeam adds. And then finally, when it comes to cloud mobility, this is all about portability of your data and being able to move to one cloud from on-premises, move from one cloud to another, so on and so forth. So let's quickly scan through some of the items that help to support this. So some of the quick hits here, when we say Azure native, the first thing we're talking about is rapid deployment. So being able to subscribe and launch directly from the marketplace is your expectation when you're going to buy something that works natively in Azure. It has to have an agentless backup. Again, we want to treat the cloud in its native form. We don't want to keep forcing it to look and smell like a physical infrastructure by plugging agents and other pieces of software here and there. We have to utilize the native snapshotting tools in there for VMs, much like we do for Hyper-V and vSphere VMs locally, but we have to use these in order to achieve that more frequent backup and even faster restore. We're completely automated to help build efficiency around what you're doing here. That native integration, again, helps you to automate that snapshot, but not just automate the creation of it, but also automating the backup of it, automating the retention policies so that you can have a more reliable cloud backup. And again, moving that data where it needs to be in Azure to help you get the most out of your spend in the cloud. Fast and flexible recovery is something that we really stake our claim on here at Veeam. This is something that we find near and dear. We know that backup is a means to an end, and recovery is that end. This is what you turn to when the chips are down and you really need to save the day. What's important when you're dealing with a cloud solution is that it's fast, right? We all have to get backups done quickly to get through our backup window, but it's got to be flexible in terms of recovery. You may not always need to put back an entire VM. Sometimes you just need to do file level or folder level type restore operations, and that is completely supported. Again, coming back to helping you with your spend, and the first thing to do here and to look at is how to optimize your cloud costs. You've got to control those cloud costs, especially when you're thinking about doing backup, adding a copy of something. You want to optimize the protection, and in order to do that, you've got to have some way to estimate it, right? We all start out on this journey wanting the platinum package. I want it backed up as much as possible. I'm going to keep it forever. I want a recovery point every 15 minutes or maybe every 15 seconds, and it just goes from there. But when you get into the cloud, all of those things cost. Not so much putting data in the cloud, but when you're getting data back, when you're moving things around, when you're moving it from one storage to the other, all of these things create costs. And what Veeam's done for Veeam Backup for Azure is to put in a built-in calculator that allows you to go through and figure out, what do I need? What is this going to cost me? What is the effect of my spend going to be? So that you know and you can plan for that before you even get started. Retention is something else that helps you maximize the cost. Again, we can take Azure snapshots in an automated manner. We, again, automated, back them up, and can even send them over to Azure Blob, which, again, is going to help you save money for that long-term archival or that long-term retention. Security is everything, and Veeam Backup for Azure gives you the ability to isolate your backup data from production by supporting things like cross-resource groups and cross-region groups, so that you don't have to, if something happens in the production environment, let's say it's that bad actor, that malicious contractor we talked about, and they do something in production, you can rest assured that your backups that are completely in a different resource group or a different region are protected and ready to recover from when needed. A layered defense is something that is wildly important for your security, especially as you're dealing with breaches from cyber attacks. Multi-factor authentication has become the norm today. We see it in everything from medical applications to using Office 365 and Teams, even to video games. Multi-factor authentication has become the standard for making sure that it's not just, losing your password that's taped underneath your monitor or someone seeing that and taking advantage of your data. Just a couple more, and we're going to turn it over to Edward. We've got a portable backup format. I talked to you about that earlier when we mentioned cloud portability, or cloud mobility, I should say. And what this means is that our VDK backup format is inherently portable. And what this does for you is it enables seamless backup, recovery, and even migrations across a multi-cloud environment. You may not always be on the cloud that you're on today. You may migrate to a different public cloud. You may adopt a different private cloud, maybe with a vendor that's providing backup as a service for you. As such, having that portability allows you to move that data without having to go through, really rigorous re-indexing, having to tell the backup product what's in it. It's very, very simple and easy to use. And that's what allows us to have even a two-step portability when you're migrating or recovering any type workload to Azure or Azure Stacks in 2 easy clicks. And then once it's there, it begins being picked up by the policies that are already in place to protect data as it shows up. You may ask, how do I go about getting this? There are a couple of different ways to go about getting it right now today. We have our free edition. We like to let people check things out at Veeam, but not just in a trial fashion, right? For small businesses and for people that really want to see this work, maybe it takes you longer than 30 days to see that, you can take advantage of the free edition, which is basically unlimited resources that can protect up to 10 Azure VMs. Alternatively, we do have a bring your own license. So you may have heard of the Veeam Universal License. So it's one license that works for most of our products today. And again, these are things that you can buy in a subscription type model, and you can use them for Veeam Backup and Replication. You can use them for Veeam Backup for Azure, Veeam Backup for AWS. It's a really simple system that allows you to not only use a license somewhere, but when you no longer need it, you can reclaim it and use it elsewhere. Really that simple. And then finally, a lot of people like to see things in work. They like to see a demo. Live demos are always better than a recorded video. So in many, many places on Veeam.com, you won't miss it. There is a little link that says request a demo, request a live demo. And that's with our systems engineers. You can either join in a pre-scheduled demo that happens on a regular basis, or we can tailor one to fit your needs working with the sales team. So thank you again, and I'd like to now turn it over to our resident expert on all things Office 365, Mr. Edward Watson.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Billy. And before we get it, kind of switch gears here, I think it's definitely worth mentioning that Gartner recently did come out with their data center backup and recovery Magic Quadrant, and did once again mention that Veeam was a leader with highest in ability to execute. And there was a good mention in there on our new or a fairly recent Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 product, and that was definitely one of the highlights. So this is a product that's actually been around, coming up to 4 years, and has gained a tremendous amount of leadership in the space. So let's dive into how this works. And really, when you think about Veeam Backup for O365, a lot of what Billy mentioned, the accidental deletions, the security threats, the retention policy gap, and other dangers we mentioned, those all apply regardless of whether it's Office 365, Azure, infrastructure as a service workloads, SaaS, software as a service workloads. All the same dangers really do apply as long as, obviously we're talking the cloud here. And ultimately, what we're talking about in terms of VBO here is eliminating that risk. We talked about all the dangers. Essentially, what we're doing is eliminating the risk of losing access to the data, whether that's Exchange Online, whether that's SharePoint Online, whether that's OneDrive for Business data, or even Teams data. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into how Teams works and how to protect that data. No backup is complete without a restore. Veeam, we're pretty famous for all our various restore options, so that's a big differentiator for us, is giving you the power to restore however you choose. And legal and compliance, we touched on that earlier as well. Do you really have the ability to get really granular, search your entire environment, find the needle in a haystack, the individual file or document that you need, and be able to get that off to your HR or compliance officer. These are all capabilities that really do fill the gaps for a lot of the reasons that we've covered already. And just so you all know, we do have a community edition version of this product. So if you do have 10 users or less, or perhaps a small department you'd like to try this product with, we do have this community edition, which is for implementations of up to 10 users or less, or 1 terabyte of SharePoint data. And just to kind of go a little bit deeper into the restore options, we actually have 25 recovery options in VBO to date. And this may seem overwhelming at first, but essentially what we're doing is, again, putting you in the driver's seat, giving you all the possible export options you might need, all the different formats you might need, all the different save and send options you might need, recovery options, recovering back in O365, recovering to the cloud, what basically, putting you in the driver's seat and giving you control over that environment when it comes to the recovery process. And this especially comes into play when you look at the overall backup market, and these are differentiators that we have, is our recovery options. Another differentiator that Veeam has is the ability to give you basically any storage target you choose. We're very storage agnostic, as many of you know, and so we give you a variety of options. If you want to store back on-prem, you can store O365 data back on-prem. The cloud, obviously, Azure Blob, S3 compatible, object storage, service providers, however which way, we definitely give you the flexibility to choose whichever storage works for you. Unlike a lot of vendors, which may actually force you into a particular storage, or even, worst case, lock you into a particular storage. So again, going into the cloud mobility where you might need to essentially move that data over time. Moving on, I just want to mention V5, version 5 of this product is coming. So we will essentially deliver a purpose-built, built from the ground up for Microsoft Teams data protection product. Stay tuned in the next few months for this. And just want to finish up here by stating, we have 99,000 downloads of this product to date. This is a battle-tested product, so you may notice a few logos here that look familiar. So definitely look into this product. We have an asset which should help you navigate within this market, help you develop the strategy, help you as you really take action in it for O365 backup and data protection. And lastly, I'd like to leave you with this link, which is see for yourself. Ultimately, take a free trial, see for yourself, take a test drive, free for 30 days, and see if you like what you see. We hope you do. So with that, I think we'll turn it back and answer any questions that are floating around.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. We do have some questions for you. I'm just going to bring up the poll for everyone out there in the audience. What additional information would you like about the Veeam solution? And I'll leave that up while we answer some of these questions. I've been sorting the questions that have come in so far in the in the audience console here. So feel free to interrupt if you see any out there that catch your eye that you want to answer. The first one first one that caught my eye here is actually about for people who are already a Veeam customer. They're asking, can I use my Veeam Universal licenses to license Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Absolutely, you can. Just as I mentioned on the slide, if you've got extra VUL licenses, you can use those universal licenses today. Alternatively, if you've got a Veeam product that that is under VUL that you're not using right now, you can use that license for it. Again, that universal license is completely portable for the Veeam products.
Nice, very nice. Next question, how can I get a demo of Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to do it. You can kind of go with a lead demo, again, from our SEs. You can go out to veeam.com, and on the right-hand side of just about any page, any of the product pages, you will see request a demo. You can go through that. We also have ongoing demos that our sales teams put on. You can talk with your local rep about that one. And finally, most of you folks out there are gearheads, so you can always check it out. Again, we showed the free edition that supports up to 10 VMs, so you can try it for yourself.
Very nice. I like that. And the next question is about Microsoft Teams backup. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so great question. Basically, how Teams acts is essentially an abstract layer, basically collecting data from OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, basically acts as an abstraction layer. So essentially, it's unstructured, what we would consider unstructured data. And to date, many backup vendors can back up the data that resides within each of those three sources. But Microsoft actually recently provided the APIs for backup vendors to now back up things like the metadata, things like the configuration, settings, tabs, posts, etc. So definitely, as you're looking at a Teams data protection backup vendor, definitely consider whether they actually have a native or purpose-built solution like Veeam will have very shortly.
Very nice. Great comment here from Brandon. He said Veeam software is one of our best tools, or Veeam software is one of the best out there for virtualization. Veeam backup and replication is a great product to use as well. Use it for personal machines, works great. So someone else here said we use Veeam and love it. Lots of great feedback about the Veeam solution. Another question here they're asking about is replication of backup data from on-premises, for example, to another data center or up to the cloud. Is there any way to sort of throttle that, or how do you know how much bandwidth you need for replication?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we try not to force you to have to deal with that. If you think about the name of our product, Veeam Backup and Replication. Replication is in there. It's been there since the beginning. As of our current shipping version, V10A, actually this came out in V10, the original release, you now have both low bandwidth and high bandwidth options. So as the intelligent replication that's built in, you can choose the one that best fits your needs, and it will act accordingly as not to saturate your pipe during these times. Again, depending on what you're sending and what type of backup it is, obviously there could be larger amounts of data for a full or smaller amounts of data for an incremental. But our backups and the way that we move data is built with replication in mind, so it's intelligent in how it works, and again, you've got some options there. And stay tuned for more.
Very nice. Yeah, you all continue to always innovate. I like that. A question here from Dave. Actually, he's asking about cloud support. What clouds is it possible to replicate your data up to with Veeam?
When it comes to replication, Edward, I don't know if there's a limitation on it. I know when it comes to our thoroughbred products for it, we've got offerings specifically for AWS and Azure. Of course, any cloud is just a data center somewhere else, right? So you could always get crafty in how you instantiate a Veeam server on the other side So there's many options and way to do this. We've got many data sheets and information and knowledge base on how to do it. And as always, your SE team's ready. Edward, did I leave anything major out there or miss anything?
No, just a quick shout out to, I just want to say thanks for all the love, the Veeam love there from our supporters. And I do want to give a shout out to, the service providers as well, because we do know there's, they're a very valuable ecosystem for us, and certainly give you that really tailored handheld approach if you want that backup as a service offering as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, as just to echo what Edward said, thank you again for the fantastic comments. I'd leave you guys with this. We have a saying at Veeam, and the saying is, it just works. It's one of the things that helped bring me to this company. And why it's unique and why it stands out is because it's not our slogan. It's not marketing. That's just what we hear from our customers. So thank you again for the time today. We appreciate it, and check out more information on veeam.com.
Awesome. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Edward and Billy, and thank you to Veeam for supporting today's event. Lots of great questions coming in. We'll have to get back to these electronically. We do appreciate all the great questions and all the Veeam love as well that's coming in. Always good to see. So with that, it's time for another prize drawing. We have an Amazon $500 gift card that's going out to Robert Dudley of Texas. Congratulations, Robert Dudley of Texas. And then we have 2 Nintendo Switches. Those are going out to Daniel Garcia of Colorado and Mark Girk from Nebraska. Congratulations. Still 1 more gift card and 2 more Switches to give out, so make sure you stay tuned. We appreciate that. And with that, it's my pleasure now to introduce our next presenter on today's Megacast. I'm excited to have Mr. David Wang, Director for Storage Product Marketing at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
And so as
Absolutely.
you see from the title here, my name is David Wang, and I lead product marketing for storage at HPE. And we have a pretty exciting session all about reimagining hyper-converged infrastructure. And if we take a step back for a minute, let's think about how over the past 10 years, HCI has been an amazing platform that people have adopted to run virtualized environments. And what we're really talking about now is what's the evolution? Where is HCI trying to go further so that you can support more workloads? And I'm excited to introduce you guys to a new platform, if you haven't heard of it before, called Nimble Storage DHCI. Looking at where you guys are in IT today, I think everyone's ready for a change. I think from a presentation standpoint, we're ready for the technology to work in our favor. You look at it from a personal life, we're ready for a change, ready to get out of the house and so forth. And if you think about it from an IT standpoint, you guys are obviously facing a ton. You're dealing with complexity of infrastructure across the stack. You're dealing with the firefighting that's holding your business back. And you have this insane pressure amid all these business changes to do more with less people. And so the right architecture is going to make the world of a difference. And many of you looking today are on this journey trying to figure out, well, what's that next generation IT stack going to be for your business? And a lot of people are adopting HCI. The first thing I'd mention is HCI, if you think about it, why do you love HCI if you're using HCI? It's much more about the experience that HCI provides than so much the architecture. And what I mean by experience is I'm referring to the fact that HCI just makes life super easy end-to-end from install to upgrade through the entire process. Because of software-defined infrastructure, because of automation, it's really easy to deploy the system. You have the elimination of runs through software-defined infrastructure that makes your VMs provisioned and managed all at the per VM basis. And scalability is really easy because you simply drop in a new node to the environment and it scales out in increments, and it's really easy from a scaling standpoint. So that's why people love HCI, and it's really the experience, not so much what the architectural aspects mean. But that's what becomes very interesting right now. Because if you think about what HCI has done, people have been using it for the past decade for workloads like VDI and general purpose applications. They've been using it for small site deployments. But as they think about where their IT stack needs to go, think about mixed workloads and consolidation. Think about business critical apps with high demanding SLAs on performance and availability and economics. You start seeing that the agility of what HCI provides actually comes at a cost to reliability and efficiency. So if we actually unpack the architecture of HCI, there are some limitations here. And you look at the left side of the screen, east-west traffic is caused for the scale-out architecture, means you're taking a performance penalty. Your read latencies are going to be slower, they're going to be less consistent. Your write latency is going to be slower as well as you read across the environment. You look at it from an availability and resiliency standpoint. When you lose a node within an HCI environment, you're not only losing access to the application, you're also losing access to the data. And if you happen to set up your environment for redundant mirroring, you now have to rebuild your entire environment when you lose a node, and that's taking an impact on your applications. And then last but not least, when you look at it from an efficiency standpoint, the linear scalability is both a good thing and a bad thing, right? The good aspect, as we mentioned, is it's easy to add a node in the environment and you can scale out non-disruptively. But the bad aspect of it is if you just want more storage capacity, you're bringing along more CPU, you're bringing along more VM tax. But if you just want more CPU, you got to drag along more SSDs and drives, and that's expensive. And so the linear scaling of HCI actually comes at a detriment in terms of a cost standpoint relative to, let's say, a 3-tier architecture. And so this is where at HPE we've been on this journey over the past couple of years trying to figure out, well, how do we take HCI further? How do we rethink the architecture? And so the question I have for you to think about is, what if you could have that experience that you'll know and love, but do it for all of your business critical applications, your mixed workloads, and don't take any trade-offs. Don't worry about the limitations associated with performance or availability or economics. Get everything that you want across the board. And that's where, if you haven't heard of this platform before, I'm really excited to introduce you to Nimble Storage DHCI. We call it HCI 2.0 because the D in DHCI, if you haven't seen it before, it represents disaggregated HCI. And if we kind of pause for a minute, and if you think about it, and if you've been in the industry for a while, you'll know that you might be thinking inherently, well, this D, is this like a marketing thing? Is it make-believe? Is it an oxymoron? Because HCI is supposed to mean aggregated and D means disaggregated. Like, what the heck are you guys up to at HPE? DHCI represents the evolution of HCI from the standpoint that it gives you and it preserves the HCI simplicity, but what it does is allows for disaggregated scaling of compute and storage resources for better economics. What it brings is better resiliency from a data standpoint. What it brings is better performance for your applications. So we call it HCI without limitations because it's hitting across all those dimensions. The first aspect is it's really simple. As you'll see in a couple slides that we're going to show you, is the experience is the HCI experience end to end. But we go above and beyond with artificial intelligence to really optimize and streamline day 2 operations. The second dimension is the resiliency of this platform. It is designed and measured for 6 nines of data availability across the board. And that's really exciting for customers that have mission critical applications. They also bring in performance where you're getting, with all-flash storage, sub-millisecond latencies and very, very fast write latencies in comparison to HCI that is just going to blow them out of the water. And then the efficiency standpoint as well, where you have a very easy mechanism to scale out the environment from small to grow big in a modular fashion, but do it with the granularity that you're not over-provisioned on resources and you're adding only what you need. If there's any takeaway at all from the session together, this one slide really captures and encapsulates the point to come across, which is the fact that DHCI is a new architecture that's made to do more than traditional HCI. We have testing data that's showing that you're getting a 10x faster application performance over HCI. You're getting a 4x more reliable system with a more improved mean time to data loss based on the number of resiliency factors and the failure domains within the architecture for business critical apps. And that you're able to drive a 5x better efficiency and better economics as you scale the environment due to the scalability of the system to scale based on what you actually need to use. And that's data that we actually have that's tried and true and tested based on competitive HCI systems, as you see below. And so looking at the experience, we talked about HCI, the hyper-converged experience from install to upgrade. So think about deployment, think about management, scale, and upgrades. End-to-end DHCI hits the mark. We built innovative software called the DHCI automation software that automates the configuration, provisioning, and so forth of the entire system from a deployment standpoint, where all the automation built in allows any VM admin to stand up the entire stack in less than 15 minutes from rack to apps. So super easy to deploy. The management of the system itself is VM-centric, just like HCI, where you leverage vVols for your data stores that eliminate the management of LUNs, and you don't have to worry about how you map your VMs to the underlying storage infrastructure. All of that is using a software-defined storage framework to allow that management to occur at the data services level, at the provisioning level. And then scalability, as we mentioned before, start small and scale out. And we also even introduced this recently in April of this year. We introduced the notion of single-click software upgrades. So you're now talking about end-to-end lifecycle management is really easy. Last but not least is the supportability of the system. Not only is it a single call for support across the entire IT stack, but it's also using the power of intelligence and our AI platform. That means you actually get predictive analytics working for you, and if you need help, you get a direct call to level 3 support. So in comparison to HCI vendors, there's no L1 hold waits, there's no escalations to level 2, you just get L3 anytime you need help across the platform. Scale, I mentioned the simplicity factor. It's very easy end-to-end. It's software-defined. Your resource discovered through the configuration tool. Virtual volumes eliminates the LUNs. All the automation and services are done at the VM basis. And then we have predictive analytics that even show you resource management. How are your compute resources growing and scaling? When do you need to do upgrades within the system? All of that is just handed to you on a silver platter, making it easy. And that's really built into what we refer to as global intelligence, and that's artificial intelligence that's actually working in the background. We have an AI platform, if you're not familiar with it, called InfoSight, and it's built over the last 10 years, and it uses cloud-based machine learning. It takes in all of this data across our entire installed base, trying to figure out patterns within our customers' environments to see if they can identify bottlenecks and problems in advance. And so what this is able to do for customers right off the bat, when you get and install a DHCI in 15 minutes, you have this AI platform that's looking over the environment. And so think about performance management. Think about the headaches associated with trying to identify a performance bottleneck within any virtual machine. We get to eliminate the time associated with diagnostics, with remediation, with having to fix the problem. All of that work goes away for customers because within the tool, we're actually applying multivariate machine learning that looks across the entire stack. What that means for you is if you happen to get your customers and stakeholders calling to say, hey, I have a VM that's exhibiting some intermittent latency. You can simply log into our tool through InfoSight and within a single click have the visibility across all of your virtual machines, identify which VMs are actually exhibiting latency, and then have a single click that isolates and figures out what is the diagnostics, what's happening here. Is it your host is as over-provisioned, your memory is ballooning, you're out of storage capacity, whatever the issue is, the diagnostics is given immediately through the advanced analytics that we have built into InfoSight, and then we have recommendations. Things such as, hey, as people are growing out their environment, you have over-provisioned VMs, or you have VMs that are provisioned that you're not actually using, where we provide recommendations up front saying, hey, VMs over here, here, and here were made over the last 6 months, but you haven't had any activity on it in the last 4 months. There's no workloads running on it. Now you can take all of your VMs and say, okay, let me repurpose these virtual resources for different workloads to improve performance of other apps. So you just think about a net is it's not just automation of how you manage the system, how you deploy your resources, but think about even day 2 operations completely gets eliminated from a pain standpoint through DHCI and InfoSight. Resiliency, we've already talked about this standpoint. It's an absolutely resilient platform. One thing to call to your attention on the demanding application standpoint is the fact that you don't have to make decisions. We all know in HCI there is this 3-legged race or 3-legged stool where you're trying to balance between performance, resiliency, and efficiency. If you want to make an HCI more resilient, you can crank up the triple mirroring, the quad mirroring of the system, so it allows for a ton of redundancies, but what are you doing at the same time? You're eating up your storage capacity. So you're making that trade-off between performance, resiliency, and efficiency. Out the gate, this is always on data services with DHCI, where from a resiliency standpoint, we have the ability to tolerate 3 simultaneous drive failures. That's the equivalent of doing quad mirroring on VxRail as an example. That's out the gate driving the highest level of efficiency from data storage as well, because you don't have to create the mirroring in an HCI architecture in comparison to what you need within DHCI. It's just by default, most usable capacity out the system, all the data reduction that you need, as well as the highest level of data resiliency and integrity at the same time. And then I've already kind of mentioned this point as well as the scalability of the system. I think it's important to call it too is scalability of DHCI is not limited to just the on-prem infrastructure, but it's also the ability to extend this out into the cloud. And so since we're talking today also about data protection, something to think about is how do you want to protect your data? You want to modernize your on-prem environment. You want to be able to have the right system for your production applications. But as you think about data protection, are you going to stand up a second data center? Are you going to look at the cloud as an opportunity to extend data protection? Everybody needs data protection, and they need it as easy as it is to manage their on-prem primary environment. And so what we're excited to introduce back in June of this year, so just about 2 months ago, is Cloud Volumes Backup. It is a built-in enterprise cloud data protection offering that just comes standard with DHCI. If you think about the concept of your iPhone, I got an iPhone in front of me here, iCloud is a single click. I can start backing up all the pictures on my phone with iCloud. I don't have to manage any infrastructure. I don't have to worry about policies and how I do changes and how I do recoveries. It's just standard. You just turn it on. Cloud Volumes Backup for DHCI is the iCloud for iPhone. With our enterprise cloud data protection offering, there is nothing to manage in the cloud. We are setting up our entire cloud environment through Cloud Volumes that's co-located next to all the public cloud providers that allow for us to be able to help customers very easily extend data protection into the public cloud, pay as you consume, pay as you protect, scale up, scale down elastically. But the kicker here is the ability to have no egress costs. You're not paying a dime to get your data back when you need to recover it. And you're also not forced into any cloud lock-in where we have the ability to restore that data once it's in our cloud environment. You can restore it in AWS, you can restore it on-prem, you can restore it in GCP, you can leverage the computing power of the public cloud providers, and you got this amazing solution that gives you flexibility to run your backup data, whether you want to do it for test dev, whether you only want it for insurance, or maybe you even want to run analytics against a data set. You can do all those use cases while you're protecting, and at the same time, there is nothing to manage in the back end. It's completely effortless from that standpoint. And this is just a quick GUI shot of what that looks like. And we're really talking about data protection in less than 5 minutes using Cloud Volumes with conjunction with DHCI. So I think we're getting towards the end of the time with our session today. And so just kind of give you one quick case study to just kind of paint this into perspective for you. PetSure is a financial services institution based out of Australia. And PetSure was running VDI for their sales reps over the past history, and they were running in AWS, and they loved it. They loved it. It was absolutely simple to manage, really easy experience, and they could support their remote workers efficiently. The problem happened that when COVID hit, they had to all of a sudden scale up their entire company into VDI remote workers, and at that point, they made an economical decision that said, when they looked at running all these remote workers in the public cloud, the economics and the cost associated with operating that larger environment was cost prohibitive for them. And so they had to figure out how they bring all those VDI remote workers back on-prem. And so they went out and looked in the market to say, what can I do? Clearly, VDI is a great use case for HCI. And so they went to Nutanix, and they also went to Nimble Storage DHCI to see which one would do the mark for them. And they ultimately decided on Nimble Storage DHCI because of all the reasons that we talked about. But the killer point here is what they got out of it at the end of the day. And so after deploying Nimble Storage DHCI for all of their remote workers, they were able to show us financially that they're able to reduce their operating costs by 50%. They're able to improve the performance for all their remote workers by 2x. That drove obviously a better remote worker experience. And they're able to deliver 50% faster application provisioning that allowed them to be more valuable and quicker in response to their business. And so to kind of wrap us up, why DHCI? And it's DHCI it's HCI without limitations, because it's allowing organizations to take that experience that they love about HCI and take it further. And so this is everything about being faster and more responsive for your business. It's about getting out of the fighting of the fire mentality and having AI that's managing and operating that infrastructure for you, and the ability to optimize your resources and drive a better ROI and economics on the infrastructure that you use to power those apps. So, with that, just hopefully you guys got something out of it and this made sense for you, and I'm glad to stay on for answer any questions, but definitely wanted to appreciate your time today on the session.
Excellent presentation, David. Really, really cool stuff you guys are doing there at HPE. This sounds like a really exciting new solution, I bet, that a lot of the audience hasn't heard about. And so we do have some questions here coming in for you from the audience. Let me go ahead and bring up the poll question. And I've just brought that up on the screen for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the HPE solution? And let's see, I've put a lot of questions there for you in the queue. I'm not sure if you see those, David, but the first one that catches my eye I wanted to ask you is about this kind of, to me at least, a relatively new category. Is disaggregated HCI a real category out there that's growing, or how do you fit this in with kind of the broader landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So we brought this product to market June of last year at our Discover conference, and shortly after, IDC and the analyst community has started to pick this up as well because, so to give you some examples, IDC recently announced, this is July of last year, that they've expanded the taxonomy of HCI to include this new category of disaggregated HCI because they're seeing the market evolving. At the same time, Gartner, just about 2-3 weeks ago, just came out with their new hype cycle for compute, and they included disaggregated HCI, or they refer to as DHCI. And it's the same concept of, so to answer your question, absolutely. This is not just marketing. This is not just a product, but it's really a new market space that's growing because people want to see the HCI experience on new workloads and to push it further. And so, yeah.
Very nice, very cool. Another question here about the Nimble Storage DHCI solution. Is it only available as a CapEx, or is there an OpEx way to model to purchase this?
Yeah, good question. So both. You know, we give our customers flexibility and choice. If you want a VM vending machine and consume it as a service, well, we can give you that complete experience, that complete cloud experience through HPE GreenLake. Or if you want to do the traditional procurement method and pay up front and depreciate over a number of years, you can do that as well.
Very nice. That's cool. I know that could help a lot of companies out there who don't have the immediate CapEx available, perhaps, to get started. Next question, does Nimble Storage DHCI work with containers, or can it only work with virtual environments or VMs?
Yeah, it's interesting. This product was designed through all of the automation software. We have a very sophisticated vCenter plugin that makes it that whole VM-centric experience. But customers are increasingly looking to see more flexibility. So last year we announced the integration with Google Anthos that provides for hybrid cloud container support, so you can lift and shift apps from the cloud and bring it on-prem, or vice versa. So containers is absolutely a first-class citizen. We have all of the Kubernetes integrations, so whether it's Google Anthos or HPE Cloud or HPE Container Platform, both of them are supported. So it's using the standard open APIs that's supported through Kubernetes for containers. I'd actually even add on top that we're hearing increasingly interest for people wanting to be able to run bare metal applications on this platform too, and you absolutely can. There's flexibility and choice and the ability to do that.
Nice. Let's see, another question they're asking, does this only work with if you have HPE compute servers, or will this storage, like DHCI solution, work with other brands?
Yeah, good question. So today, and I believe if I kind of think in the future as well, it is only supporting HPE servers. And that partially that has to go with the experience that you're creating, right? You have a single call to support. You have analytics plumbed in across storage and compute, and it's all fed into InfoSight. And so to maintain that level of experience that you're looking for, we're using HPE servers. On the server side, just to also call to your attention, is that it supports a wide variety of HPE servers. I believe both Gen 9 and Gen 10 ProLiant servers are supported, but you have the DL380s, the 360s, you have the 580s as well, the big dense ones, and then in April of this year, a few months ago, we announced the support of the 325s using the AMD processor, so you get a nice little 1U box of servers that drives a lot of efficiencies in terms of density of VMs. The other thing to also add on servers, I failed to mention it earlier, is the ability to leverage your existing servers in a brownfield configuration. So one of the downsides of HCI is it's a rip and replace. You got an existing investment in your server infrastructure and you want HCI experience, guess what? You're throwing out all your old servers, and it's a waste. What's nice about DHCI is the ability to leverage your existing switches, your existing top-of-rack switches, your existing ProLiant servers, install the software that comes with the DHCI system, and now you're up and running in 15 minutes with the HCI experience, leveraging those existing investments. So that's another point to talk about on the server side.
Excellent. Excellent. And then there's a question here from Scott. He's asking if this can be used in a hospital environment. Are there some common use cases like that, or will this work just about anywhere?
It absolutely will work in a hospital environment. It will absolutely. So the thing about this system is that this is, HCI has a home, right? We have another platform at HPE for HCI called SimpliVity, right? And the traditional HCI architecture is really good in smaller environments. So if you have a small environment like an edge or a remote office, a manufacturing facility where you're running a handful of VMs, you'll probably want to go with like a SimpliVity, a small HCI is a good fit. If you're talking about applications that are performance intensive, high throughput requirements, you need more flexibility in how you scale, you have more than a handful of virtual machines, and you want to have a simpler way to manage all of them. So a hospital will be a good case, for example, with that. We have a ton of hospital customers that currently already use HP Nimble Storage, so there's a really strong fit there. And that's where Nimble Storage DHCI is just going to be a solid fit for you. So think about more diversity of workloads. If that's the kind of environment you live in, then you're going to love DHCI because it's going to give you that flexibility and freedom at the same time.
Excellent. Another question from Pete. He's asking about scalability. Is there how does this start? Where does this start at, and how big does it scale up to?
Yep. So you can start as small as 2 servers, 2 ProLiant servers. You can, from a size standpoint, you can do 2 1U boxes of 325s and a Nimble Storage chassis array. So that's 4 plus 1 plus 1, so 6U, I think, is the smallest configuration. From a capacity standpoint, it can go very, very small. So think about multi-dimensional scaling. If you want to scale, okay, so you have a config. Let's say you started with 2 servers and a Nimble Storage array. If in that DHCI config, if you realize that you need more compute power to support more increase in demands on the existing data sets, you simply just add more servers to the environment, and the automation software actually provisions the servers for you. It does auto discovery. It's about 1.5 minutes. You can add a new server to the environment. Now, if you think about storage performance and data performance specifically, if you need more data performance, you can non-disruptively upgrade the controllers in the storage system that drives in higher throughput and performance on, so if you want more IOPS, performance, you can non-disruptively upgrade the controller power within your storage environment. If you need more storage capacity, you can simply add another bank of storage drives, or you can scale out the environment by adding expansion shelves. So there is a ton of flexibility in terms of how you actually scale out, whether it's cross compute, whether it's cross storage performance, or whether it's cross storage capacity. And all of that happens non-disruptively through the automation software.
I love it. Very nice. So if people want to learn more about this new DHCI solution, what should they do? How should they get started?
Yes, first thing, come to the web page, right? We have a nice web page for Nimble Storage DHCI that can give you more context of what it's about. I think we loaded a video in here on this particular webinar. Check out the video, and then reach out to your channel partner and sales rep. We're all really excited. A major win just came through like half an hour ago, and the market and the customers are loving it. So please talk to us, reach out. I think my information is loaded here as well. Love to hear from you and love to work with you.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your presentation.
Cool. Thanks, guys, and thanks for sticking around. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Check out the Handouts tab, everyone out there in the audience. Just like David said, it will take you to hpe.com, and there's a special video on that page on the new HPE Nimble Storage DHCI solution, as well as recommended resources around what DHCI can do for you at your company. Really cool stuff. All right. Well, with that, it's time for our final Amazon $500 gift card giveaway. We have a gift card going out to Kira Patera from Montana. Congratulations, Kira Patera from Montana. And then finally, our 2 grand prize winners, final grand prize winners On the event today, we've got 2 more Nintendo Switches. They're going to Andrew Pierce of Massachusetts and Steve Wilson of Utah. Congratulations to all the prize winners. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming Megacast or EcoCast event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat about having you on a future event. And before you go, I want to remind you out there that we have other upcoming events. This one is on modernizing and securing healthcare IT. It's happening next week. We hope to see you there. You can go to events.actualtechmedia.com to learn about all of our upcoming events, and we hope to see you on an upcoming event. I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. After today's event, as soon as I end the event, you'll be automatically directed to a 1-question survey on what you'd like to see for upcoming event topics. What are you interested in? DevOps, containers, cloud, data protection, security, edge, AI. Give us some ideas. We want to shape our 2021 schedule with your thoughts and your feedback in mind. So I'm going to post the final winners of all the gift cards right now in the chat. And don't forget to download the handouts, and hope that you'll answer this final poll question that will appear in your web browser here in just a moment. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's event. I hope that you had a good time. I hope that you learned a lot. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.